All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is David Patrick Carey with Church of the Eternal Logos. And today we're going to be reviewing, deconstructing, and diving into a recent interview by tech oligarch Peter Thiel. He's come up in multiple previous streams we've discussed regarding transhumanism, technological advance, AI. And our last conversation with Peter or about Peter Thiel was actually an interview he did with the Hoover Institute, the conservative think tank over at Stanford University. And in it, Thiel presents himself as a Christian. He actually identifies as a Christian. And towards the very end of that interview, he talks about his worries of the Antichrist. Obviously, a topic of discussion, common here on this YouTube channel, but generally speaking right now, regarding the state of the world and the state of technology, generally speaking. Now, Peter Thiel has some very interesting contradictions. Despite claiming to be a Christian and having sort of Catholic sentiments, it appears. He may have been raised Catholic, from my understanding. He's a big fan of Rene Girard, one of the traditionalist school, sort of perennialist, and was really into sort of the mimetic theory that he puts forth. So despite claiming to be a Christian, you know, he is an openly homosexual man. And this got exposed in 2007 through a Gawker, that website that used to exist, sort of sensational news outlet. And they outed Peter Thiel against his wishes in 2007 that he was a homosexual man. Peter Thiel was so upset about this fact that he funded Hulk Hogan's lawsuit against Gawker, which essentially shut the website out of business. And so there's a lot of interesting internal contradictions in Peter Thiel's worldview. For example, he notoriously been a sort of conservative libertarian, speaking to the ills of the woke culture of the progressive left, the stagnation of true novelty and development. And how he argues democracies are a place where they actually curtail and limit individual and personal freedom, and that they are essentially a failure. Things that, oh, okay, we'd probably agree with all of that. However, as somebody who's so focused on American liberty, his company that he funded, Palantir, again named after the Seeing Stones in the Lord of the Rings, is also the most mass surveilling tech company that we can actually imagine. And so at the same time he's talking about American liberty, he's actually spearheading I've talked about it before. Palantir has a very, very intimate relationship with the IDF, Shin Bet, the Mossad, and the Israel government, generally speaking. And much of the attacks in Gaza, the West Bank, even Iran, these are being backed by Palantir. We know Palantir has been on the side of Ukraine, testing out new weaponry and automated systems. So Palantir seems to be on the wrong side of many of the issues that we discuss on the channel, and especially threats to human life. Again, central point being the Ukraine war, what the genocide that Israel is committing. And so how ironic that he's talking about freedom, and yet one of the most iconic companies that he's associated with is notoriously symbolic for mass surveillance and the curtailing of all American liberty. So he has this weird theory, and we're going to watch this whole interview today. And I put together a quick little overview of like a personality profile of Peter Thiel. And essentially we're exposing today Peter Thiel because his worldview and this idea, I've seen Christians actually begin to support him. Oh, look, we got Peter Thiel on our side. He's Christian. He's worried about the Antichrist. But if you actually listen to what he's saying, what does he believe the Antichrist is? Well, he has a theory of stagnation. He's been talking about this essentially since 2008. And his theory is that Western civilization, America specifically, has experienced a technological advanced stagnation, a stagnation really in regards to all innovation and novelty. This can include art, engineering, technology, science, all these different things. And he claims that he sort of began to come to this perspective at the turn of the last century, so into early 2000s, late 90s. And he believes that the status quo, the woke left, liberal democracies, generally speaking, are leading towards this stagnation, and this therefore threatens an event that he's very much supportive of, is the technological singularity. So for him, stagnation is the Antichrist, right? When you start listening to him talking about the Antichrist in the interview that we're going to be looking at today, it's actually of like a liberal journalist, but he offers more pushback to Peter Thiel than I've seen in about any other interview. And at one point, talking about AI, talking about the companies he invests in and projects like life extension and transhumanism, that Thiel, I wouldn't say is theological. I mean, in a way he is, absolutely. But it's not an obsessive religion or religious expectation for transcendence like some of the transhumanists. And so he's kind of critiqued transhumanism, but he is still part and parcel of an interplanetary species, unlimited life expand, transhumanism. And the liberal journalist actually asked him, do you think that humanity should continue to exist? And he pauses for like 5-6 seconds before answering, which shows you how could someone who identifies as Christian actually have to contemplate whether or not the biological species of Homo sapiens should actually be able to persist in the future. This is clearly coming from someone who's a technocrat and a transhumanist who has a totally ulterior worldview. And so when he's talking about the end times and he's talking about the Antichrist, at one point, the interviewer pushes him and said, well, don't you think that your companies like Palantir and the AI companies that you've invested in, don't you think that the Antichrist would find these things beneficial? Something that I've talked about ad nauseum on this YouTube channel. And he's like, well, obviously I don't think that's the case. I don't think, he stutters all the time. I wish maybe he's autistic or something. I'm not sure, but it is difficult to hear him like express a thought because he stutters so much. But his rebuttal is, well, obviously I don't think that that's what I'm doing. And it's like, okay, so this whole thing, so he talks about the threats of AI and how this could essentially enslave the human population and the planet. Yet he's really obsessed with allowing these things to move forward so that we can curtail the stagnation that we currently reside in. And yet he believes that these have nothing to do with his threat, or what he talks about as a worrying threat of the Antichrist that he views in Christian theological terms. And then when you really push him, what his Antichrist is a figure that essentially would represent, I mean, it's almost like some radical leftist who controlled, a global liberal democracy or something. And it's like, what? No, that is not the Antichrist. He imagines, I mean, the example he uses is Greta Thunberg. What? If you're talking about like global power, threats to human freedom, mass surveillance, AI documenting and controlling every aspect, and your example of the problems and the ills of Western civilization is Greta Thunberg. I mean, obviously, I'm not a Greta fan, but she is insignificant to the orchestration of Western civilization. Yeah, she's another autist, probably like Peter Thiel, who's obsessed with climate change narrative and has been indoctrinated into it by her father and her mother. Okay. She's pretty negligible. I mean, she was on a flotilla on a ship outside Israel advocating for Palestine, and good for her. I mean, that's an issue I guess we find compatible between us two. But I mean, Greta Thunberg, this is who this, and he mentions her multiple times in the interview. It's like Peter Thiel is worried that the world leader is going to be like Greta Thunberg, and therefore we're going to have this continued stagnation in the name of political correctness and woke culture. And it's like, no, dude, it's the companies that you're funding. It's the things that you're doing that are way more indicative from an Orthodox perspective, like what actually would be a threat of the Antichrist. And so I put this little document together here. That is hitting, again, it just provides a little bit of an overview. Obviously, he's a German immigrant. He was his family moved as an infant. He got a BA in philosophy at Stanford, went to law school at Stanford. And then, of course, he's part of the PayPal mafia. We've discussed this. I did a whole stream on the background of Elon Musk. And so eventually they sell it for 1.5 billion to eBay, and this is what then creates these multi-millionaire PayPal mafias that then invested their money and funded companies like YouTube, LinkedIn, Tesla, Palantir. And so Palantir in particular, and I actually have something to show you guys, because Peter Thiel is getting ready to start a new endeavor, which is an all-digital bank for your crypto and your digital wallet. And we're going to come back to it in a second, because he's also appealing back to the Tolkien universe. It's funny how, like, Palantir are the Seeing Stones in the Lord of the Rings. It's funny how he's like obsessively using the Tolkien mythology for his companies, which are clearly going to be used by an authoritarian figure. And so, one of the things that Thiel talks about that, well, it'll come up, but he's actually like not big on liberal democracies, which we could absolutely agree with him on. And he's actually given lip service to some type of monarchy. And we've talked about Curtis Yarvin and some of his ideas. That's going to come up in here. But, it's just the blind spot of Peter Thiel is so astounding that he doesn't see the companies he's investing in, and doesn't even, and in the same breath talking about American liberty, will not then criticize what Palantir is doing. Or again, the targets, like the IDF was bragging. I read an article was bragging about how Palantir was a force multiplier because it allowed them to identify Hamas targets better. Well, how many hundreds of thousands of civilians have been killed by the IDF? And Palantir is the one selecting their targets. So that's wonderful. That's wonderful. I'd be so proud. And so it's named after, as I said, the Seeing Stones, Palantir Technology. It's a big data analytics company. Again, and who are their biggest clients? So Peter Thiel is this big critic of liberal democracies, woke culture, the federal government, entrenched bureaucracies. And then who's Palantir's biggest clients? The CIA, the FBI, it says ICE, U.S. military, but basically it plays a central role in mass surveillance, intelligence, law enforcement, and quote unquote predictive analytics. So they track, I watched the CEO one time of Palantir talk about how they have a digital profile on everybody in the United States. I mean, this was specifically on the United States. I'm sure most people who access the internet, but at least in the United States, Palantir has a profile on you. The ads that you're getting, all these analytics are being purchased from somebody, and Palantir is the one with the government contracts that allows them to monitor everything you do digitally. And they have the profile on you. So just FYI. And so why is Palantir so controversial? Well, one of its secret and powerful, considered one of the most secretive and powerful tech firms. It's criticized for civil libertarians, which ironically, Peter Thiel describes himself as a conservative libertarian. Interesting. And lauded by national security hawks and warmongers as a backbone of modern counterterrorism and defense intelligence. I've yet to see exactly how efficacious these predictive abilities of Palantir is to stop crime. But anyways, and then he's part of the Founders Fund. It's a venture capital firm. And they were behind Facebook, SpaceX, Airbnb, Stripe, and Anduril Industries, which is going to come back in just a moment. They are an autonomous military defense system. And this is who the CEO of this company, which is, what's his name? Palmer Luckey. He's like this kind of hippie dude who's actually the CEO of this AI military defense company, Anduril, and he is who Peter Thiel is getting ready to go into work with and partner for creating a new digital bank. So, that's great. The founder of Palantir, who gets all the government contracts, and then the founder of Anduril, who makes all the autonomous weaponry for the U.S. military, they're going to control your bank account and your crypto wallet. What could go wrong? And so, of course, Mithril Capital, this is how he knows, J.D. Vance, vice president of the Trump administration. And that is a growth stage investment fund, kind of an intermediary between venture capitalists and private equity. And then he has other industries he's invested in. But like I said, he claims to be a libertarian or now a post-libertarian. So he's big on free markets, anti-globalism and personal liberty. But as since his turn to what he described as like he's a post-libertarian now, he's a reactionary futurist, as he's described. And he's criticized democracy as incompatible with technological progress. Now, I wouldn't say it's incompatible with technological progress, but I would say it's incompatible with human liberty and human freedom. And he said, I no longer believe that freedom and democracy are compatible. I would totally agree with that. I think in the idea that we can actually have say and control of our political destiny in various these Western democratic nations. I mean, that has been proven to be false, whether it be the nationalist populist movements in Europe, or obviously that everything that's happened in the U.S. is we're run by a deep state, and doesn't matter how many people you vote for, AIPAC and the entrenched lobbyist groups, they're going to ultimately have sway over who does what. Doesn't matter who you vote for. So democracy, in a sense, is coming to an end. Like young people, I would say millennials and Gen Zers are way less thrilled about the expansion of democracy in the Middle East, like the Bush administration. That rhetoric isn't going to sell much. In fact, Thiel, I keep calling him Thiel, Peter Thiel, has even give lip service to the promotion of monarchy, which I'm going to highlight in just a second. So obviously he's been a supporter of Donald Trump. And even in the interview that we listened to, he's more a supporter of Donald Trump, not so much that, some of the nationalist policies Thiel is in favor of, but essentially the tech oligarchs have made an agreement that if they're going to change the status quo of Silicon Valley and kind of their industries, Trump is the only option. He literally essentially says this in the interview. And, he's funded conservative candidates like Blake Masters and J.D. Vance. His big things right now is the threat of China, woke capitalism, and Silicon Valley's progressive monoculture. Now, as I said, he is very, very much a supporter of Israel. And Palantir is one of their biggest clients outside of the U.S. government and our intelligence agencies is Israel. I mean, Palantir is totally embedded into the Israeli military and how exactly they go about some of their combat missions and finding which targets they're going to terminate, which, as we've seen, has been actually a significant amount of civilians. So whether that's deliberate, you would think it would be if Palantir is, touting all of the technological advance that they have. So anyways, religiously, he does identify as Christian, and he's been doing this more recently in the last 3 to 4 years. As I said, the Hoover Institute interview we covered before, Thiel explicitly described himself as a Christian, and I've never heard him actually face the fact that how do you deal with Christianity being your professed religious identity, and you're also a homosexual. I'm just curious how exactly he squares that circle in his own mind. I've never heard anybody ask him about that. But he claims to be, again, influenced by Rene Girard. In his mimetic desire, deeply shaped Thiel's views on competition, violence, human nature. And then, his Christianity is obviously at odds with his transhumanist desires. Now, I wouldn't say he is one of the most enthusiastic members of the transhumanist community. He's certainly part of the community. I mean, even in the interview we're getting ready to go over here in just a few minutes, he is specifically talking in favor of transhumanism, life extension, or full human integration with technology. And how exactly does that work with somebody who's professing that we're made in the image of God? I'm very curious. And that's where this Christianity, it almost feels like it's a form of rhetoric. We've talked about this with Elon Musk. They're like the ultimate gaslighters. They say one thing and do the exact opposite, or do one thing and then say the exact opposite. Either way, it's like Elon Musk is totally gaslighting us in so many different circumstances. I did a whole stream covering all these different circumstances. And in Thiel, in some way, does the same thing, because he uses the rhetoric of Christian eschatology and yet then claims that all the enterprises he's building have nothing to do with it. The Antichrist is just like some Luddite, woke, trans person who controls like a world government or something. It's like, no, that's not. And he even talks about like Orthodox Christianity in our interview today that we'll be going over. And so for him, the Christian rhetoric of the end times is just a way to describe something that would prevent the technological singularity. I haven't heard him say these words, but I'm going to phrase it the way that I interpret what he says. Essentially, the singularity is for him the second coming of Christ. And this is essentially the paradigm and the worldview of what's called Christian transhumanism. It's a very small, insignificant group. Actually, I think they're located, the head of it is in Tennessee. But it's a group of these progressive, non-denominational Christians who think that by appealing to science and technological advance, it somehow makes them like more in tune and intellectually sophisticated with their Christian faith. And their platform is that transhumanism and full transhuman integration into eternal life is the point of Christian salvation, and that science are gifts of grace from Christ so that we can then become like him. And this is essentially Christian transhumanism. And it sounds like Thiel is something of this nature, although he doesn't speak in those terms. He speaks as if he's somehow a more traditionally minded Christian, even though everything you hear him advocate totally conflates with that being the case. And so because technological advance for him fights the forces of evil, he then views himself and Palantir and all the AI and the tech companies he invests in as fighting the forces of evil, and therefore they cannot be contributing to the Antichrist. That's essentially his opinion. And again, it's so ironic that the same liberal democracies that he's criticizing are the ones that are then the biggest contractors with Palantir. Again, weird contradiction there. Professing to be a homosexual, or professing to be a Christian and living as a homosexual, interesting contradiction there, especially when you're noted, I mean, since his undergraduate times, he was known for like conservative libertarian political causes. This was before maybe he was homosexual, or certainly he was outed by Gawker about being one. So again, much of him is a contradiction, and when you hear him talk about Christianity, you wonder if he's like internally convicted and is conflicted with his sexual orientation and then the things that he says, because they seem so out of whack sometimes. But he's funded Aubrey de Grey and the Methuselah Foundation. This is Aubrey de Grey's been on Joe Rogan multiple times. He's a researcher on life extension. And even though he calls AI the most anti-Christian technology, this is Peter Thiel, he literally invests in it regarding almost most of his companies are using it. So again, it's just like Elon Musk, like giving lip service to conservatives and Christianity, and then wearing his Halloween costume called the Devil's Advocate, or yeah, it's like, what? It's just a total contradiction. I almost think they're like gaslighting or something. So, here's a little bit about the Gawker lawsuit. I'm not going to get into these details. I want to dive into the actual interview that we're going to discuss today. But here's in 2019, he says, "I no longer believe that freedom and democracy are compatible." True. And then he endorsed monarchism as potentially superior to democracy. Well, hey, that's an Orthodox Christian position. I'm all for that. I believe that monarchy is a superior position. And so he's mentioned about, again, Mencius Moldbug, Curtis Yarvin, in regards to his endorsement of monarchism. And he funded the Seasteading Institute, which seeks to build sovereign floating cities immune from state regulation. So he's been accused of being anti-democratic, elitist, technocratically authoritarian. His critics have said that he's trying to undermine liberal democratic institutions through neo-feudal ideas and such of that. I had a little bit section here in regard to Peter Thiel or Palantir's role in Israel and everything that they're doing. So Palantir software, especially Gotham and Foundry and Meta Constellation, has been used for predictive policing, immigration and customs enforcement, border surveillance, facial recognition. And what I told you guys, and in fact, we could pull the clip up if you wanted, that when J.D. Vance was on his latest appearance on Theo Von, the comedian, Thiel was actually giving legitimate criticisms of Palantir and asked J.D. Vance what his thoughts were. And he immediately says, well, I think it's going to be a great technology to prevent illegal immigrants from coming here. And I said this before these things even came into the news, that J.D. Vance's association with Peter Thiel makes him the perfect Trojan horse for bringing forth the utilization of these digital technologies and AI and mass surveillance for predictive policing policies in the name of conservative political policies. So in the name of making sure illegals aren't here, or making sure illegals can't work as undocumented workers, we need to go ahead and allow Palantir to mass surveil everything. I mean, that is J.D. Vance's essential position. And so it's something to keep an eye out for. Domestic international counterterrorism. And again, when Palantir's connections to Israel, I think it's a little concerning that if there was a false flag operation inside the domestic United States, and Palantir was the basis for us saying who somebody was working with or affiliated with, it's not a stretch of the imagination to imagine that there might be a false flag potentially done by Israel for the benefit of Israel and the United States, the military-industrial complex, to furthering conflict in the Middle East, which would make Palantir more and more money, and we could get more and more contracts. That doesn't seem an impossibility to me. Tracking pandemic and vaccine logistics, Palantir. So get your Vax card, guys. Palantir is going to be making sure that they can give you access to your daily necessities. Oh, you're not jabbed? Palantir says you can't buy groceries today. Oh, and your crypto that's in Thiel's new crypto bank, digital bank. Oh yeah, you've said naughty things online. You criticize him for being a homosexual, which he put Gawker out of business for. Military targeting, battlefield intelligence. That's what the IDF touts about Palantir and how they've been using it. Corporate espionage, financial fraud detections, that type of stuff. And so their role in the Ukraine conflict, Palantir's had a strong military relationship with the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense since 2020. Again, same thing, target identification, artillery and drone coordination, satellite imaging interpretation, logistics and troop movement. Again, how interesting that we have somebody like J.D. Vance who's, I'm against the Ukraine war. I'm against us getting involved in wars, although he's still kind of warmongers in regards to Iran. And yet the companies and the peoples that he's associated with in the circles that he moves in, such as Palantir, are literally directly involved in the Ukraine-Russian conflict. And the idea that, one, they're not utilizing new techniques, new research techniques and developments that they've come to on the battlefield to see how effective they are. Like, don't you guys see how Palantir is the establishment? If you want to use this, I mean, Trump's part of the establishment at this point, but Trump was anti-Ukraine, right? Anti-Ukraine Russian war. He's gonna stop it in the first couple of days. Well, it hasn't stopped, and the irony is J.D. Vance and Thiel have direct connections. Thiel in particular to Palantir, who then is literally the backbone of the Ukraine military operations. Like, what are we doing here? What? Of course, the very, very close ties, as I said, outside the U.S. military industrial complex. Israel is the biggest contractor of Palantir. And so they have multiple offices in Israel, is what I found. And they've worked closely with the IDF, Mossad, Shin Bet, and Israeli border control and national security agencies, monitoring Palestinians, predictive analytics in Gaza. And again, they've touted Palantir as a force multiplier for the Israelis. And what has Palantir, what do we know that they've done? Surveillance and occupied population, civilian targeting risk in Gaza and the West Bank. Wow. So this predictive crime programming, predictive stopping of crime before it ever happens. Their technology is actually going out and literally targeting civilians in Gaza and the West Bank. Wow, what a great company. Very, very interesting. And so the last thing I want to show you, though, is just a little bit of an overview in regards to his theological stuff and how we would see it as Orthodox Christians, because I want this frame to be in mind as we move through the interview. The interview is only a little over an hour. And I'm sure we'll be stopping and discussing things multiple times, but this is how we as Orthodox Christians kind of see this. These are just general outlines regarding eschatology in the view of history. The world is fallen, but redeemable through Christ, obviously. Human will, our free will, must be synergized with God's will. That's the goal of every Christian. The church is the ark of salvation. It's again resisting the spirit of the world and calling humanity to repentance. Obviously, Orthodox Christianity being the only one that still isn't fully corrupted. Not that there aren't attempts and influences within the church, but what church is resisting the spirit of the world more than the Orthodox Church? The Antichrist is not only a future person, which we absolutely believe, but is also a general spirit that operates now in systems of technocratic control, apostasy, and dehumanization, all of which I would argue the things that Thiel promotes are actually doing. So our eschatological vision includes the rise of a global regime of deceit where truth is replaced with illusions and man is offered false immortality without God, i.e. transhumanism. Perfect. Okay. Let's look at Thiel's and an Orthodox perspective on Thiel and some of his companies. So we believe man is made in the image of God. Orthodox anthropology centers on the mystery of the human person. And here's Thiel's contradictions, even though he actually gives lip service, like he's actually speaking for an Orthodox Christian perspective. I don't know if he meant Eastern Orthodox or just like a correct Christian position, but he uses that language, that verbiage in the interview. And that through Palantir, Thiel promotes predictive surveillance, treating man as a node in a data stream rather than a free being. wouldn't the predictive abilities, predictive surveillance of Palantir insinuate that Thiel believes that our environment is more determined than it is actually causally connected with human free will? Isn't that the whole basis, is that they can then find what you're going to do before you do it because they already know everything you've looked at? They've analyzed the outputs and inputs, and they know what inputs are going into your brain, so they know how you're going to react next. That doesn't sound like someone totally made in the image of God. And again, this represents a neo-Gnostic attempt to achieve omniscience through technology, which he very much talks about, a counterfeit to divine providence. The Orthodox Church teaches that true knowledge of persons come through love and divine illumination, not through analytic domination. And so surveillance technology anticipates the mark of the beast, wherein no one can buy or sell without being tracked or verified. The system trains souls to accept total control for the sake of safety and efficiency. And so what does Palantir do? They make sure you have your Vax card. They make sure that they can track everywhere you go at any time. They make sure that they know what ads you've looked at for how long, and what items you've clicked on, and what was the latest thing you looked at on Amazon. Wow, that almost sounds like the total system of control that Christians are actually worried about regarding the end times and the Antichrist. Wonder how Thiel doesn't see any of this at all connected. Again, for him, the Antichrist is someone who prevents technological advance and what he calls advocates for a stagnation. So this violates obviously our doctrine of theosis. Our goal is not technological ascension, but theosis, participation in divine energies through repentance. Thiel's transhumanist affiliations funds life extension technology, cryonics, AI, human integration, and radical biotechnology. And he endorses thinkers who believe death is a disease to be conquered, not a consequence of sin to be transfigured in Christ. So we can see, again, his Rene Girard's mimetic. That's really all his Christianity is. It's like a Petersonian utilitarian symbol set. And that Christianity just has really great symbols. They're really powerful mimetic symbols. And that we just have to use the rhetoric then of the book of Revelation for him and Christian eschatology to talk about secular things. Because clearly he doesn't believe in anything literally. Transhumanism is a Luciferian parody of the resurrection. You guys know that's my general thoughts there. The attempt to escape death through technology is rejection of Christ, who conquered death by becoming man and dying for us. Thiel's investments encourage a vision of the world where man becomes God without God, fulfilling the original sin of Eden. And so his political vision, he advocates for a post-democratic, elite-driven, technocratic civilization. So it sounds very much like the Republic in Plato's terms, right? We're going to be led by the oligarchs, the smartest and wisest among us, who also live the most debaucherous and immoral lives possible. I'm with him in regards to being post-democratic. I think more and more young people are jumping onto this bandwagon. I do think the general support and belief, let's just say the cultural belief and expectation in liberal democracies has absolutely diminished. I don't think that can be a controversial fact. It's absolutely diminished. And the promise of freedom and civil agency through these democratic institutions, we know that this is all fake. This is absolutely fake. So when he's talking about a neo-monarchy, okay, I can be in favor of a monarchy. However, his monarchy is something that's, again, like super high tech. It's like a Silicon Valley monarchy over the general population. Well, my monarchy has to be submitting to the authority of the church, right? Monarchy is totalitarian authoritarianism if it's not paired with the wisdom of Christianity and the wisdom of the Holy Orthodox Church. So, yeah, I'm not, I would be really skeptical of the type of monarchy that they're advocating for, but that is in line with the general trend of young people, and I would say our culture, generally speaking. And so he supports candidates with, this was, again, what one source said, authoritarian tendencies, but they do certainly fund geopolitical control technologies. So is J.D. Vance an authoritarian? I don't know if he is. He might be. I'm certainly skeptical of him regarding the utilization of these technologies and his association with Thiel. But that is the irony, right? Thiel talks about how he's so anti-globalist, and yet the people he partners with, these major corporations, these central banks, these powerful elite figures of various nations, they are globalists. So again, like, what gives? What's with all the hypocrisy and the contradictions in people like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk? Unless it's all deliberate. It's all sort of a game. It's a game of chess. It's that they have multiple pieces on different parts of the game board, and so they can always shift and maneuver. And so warning signs in Thiel's vision: the fusion of military power, AI, and social control, the replacement of community with algorithmic management. Again, all these things that he's contributing to, the replacement of God's providence with predictive data modeling, the centralization of power in the hands of elites. Now, he's against the centralization of global power, but at the same time constantly speaks of how we need to centralize power amongst, essentially the elite, those that are capable, those that are competent, and that the stagnation has to do with the woke culture of allowing incompetent people to occupy places of power. I don't disagree with him on that criticism, but I certainly don't want him and his ilk controlling our civilization or the federal government. And so, to conclude here, and then let's get into his actual interview. Thiel is not a cartoon villain. His vision is seductive, partially true, and deeply dangerous. To the Orthodox Christian, his life's work can be interpreted as a highly intelligent attempt to build a post-human world, one that rejects the repentance and death, replaces love with surveillance, elevates power over humility, and constructs a digital kingdom in place of the kingdom of God. The saints have warned us that the Antichrist will appeal not to obvious evil, but to the idolatry of solutions: false peace, false unity, false immorality. In this sense, Peter Thiel's empire of ideas and machines may be seen as building the infrastructure for Antichrist rule, even if he does so unwittingly. And again, he claims that he is not contributing to these things, that his work is not contributing to potential power of the Antichrist. But that's why we're here to expose his line of thought, because from an actual Orthodox Christian perspective, from the actual ideas and visions of elders and saints, what he's doing and what he's building is directly correlative to the centralized control system that is going to dominate the planet. And the fact that he thinks these are totally unconnected and that his biggest threat is Greta Thunberg, it's like, dude, you are so out of touch. It's unbelievable. So smash that like, guys. That's what we're going to dive into here today. Pink Like Peachy throws in 10, says, great info. Thanks. My hubby and I are praying about converting to Christian Orthodox. Well, glory to God, Pink Like Peachy. I think that is wonderful, and I hope that you and your husband do convert to the Orthodox Church. I promise you won't regret it. Guys, if you want to support my work today, please send in a super chat using Streamlabs, Dono Chat, or YouTube. If you prefer to use YouTube, would greatly appreciate that as well. So if you would like to support the time it takes to do work and research on these various streams, please support my work. If you have a comment or a question, feel free to throw it in there. I'd greatly appreciate that. And the notes, this will be going up on my website. And actually, I'll be launching a brand new membership community here soon that I'm really excited to kind of show you guys. Be using school.com. There's going to be so much value. And we're going to be changing things up. So I'm going to say much. I'm not even going to promote my memberships unless if you want to get early access to the school community when it launches, you can become a premium member to my website right now for $25 a month. You'll be able to join all of our meetings. And I'm going to invite all the premium members over to the school before I actually launch it publicly so people can get access and see everything. So if you're a fitness member or you're a regular website member, eventually we're going to have a few months overlap between how we're doing things with the website and all the exclusive content and the school.com. So don't worry about that. We'll figure that out in the future. But if you're going to sign up as a premium member. That way you can get access to the school community through the premium members. And then when the school community launches, the membership price is actually going to be higher than the premium membership right now. So Just throwing that out there if you guys want to be a part of that. Also, if anybody would like to set up a one-on-one session, you can do so with this link right here. We can dive into a private Zoom meeting and discuss any topic your heart desires. And if you would like to sponsor a stream, sponsor a stream, we have a ton of sponsored streams. We got 6 that I'm going to be diving through in the next 2 weeks. So you're going to be seeing, like I said, like 4 streams a week for the next couple weeks, and we'll be doing multiple sponsored streams. So if you have a topic that you would like to sponsor, please use this link right here, and I will get back to you, and you can give me a little bit of details on what the topic is that you would be interested in. And then last thing, if you guys are looking for the ultimate nicotine pouch, please use this link right here, outpouch.com/DPH. You'll get a affiliate link, get 10% off your purchase, and you'll be able to help me out a little bit. So use outpouch.com/DPH. And if anybody is in the market for some Orthodox items, check out orthodoxdepot.com. Orthodoxdepot.com. They got prayer robes, incense, icons, t-shirts, hats. Use promo code COTEL, COTEL, and you'll get 10% off. And again, another way to help me out, as well as a good Orthodox company here in the U.S. So, all right, with that being said, now let's get into some of the things that I was wanting to show you today. So this is the interview. Some of you guys may have seen clips floating around. We're going to be going through a full hour. So it essentially starts at 1 hour or 1 minute and 2 seconds, and it lasts 1 hour and 2 minutes and 3 seconds. So we're going to be here for about an hour and 1 minute going over and analyzing this. But here's something I just saw today. So this is brand new. This was from yesterday, July 2nd. PayPal co-founder Peter Thiel and Underil founder Palmer Luckey are launching Erebor, a digital bank built for crypto and tech startups. And then the Middle Earth Mixer. So this is a Tolkien Lord of the Rings account. Says it's time to stop. People are upset that they keep making Tolkien names Reddit coded, and I don't like it. Thiel's attempted theft of Tolkien's world by associating it to dystopian surveillance state concepts is absolutely criminal. So again, we see this is Christus Vincent. So a Christian, again, picking up on the themes here that we're talking about. And so if you didn't know, then you're in Anduril, go over here. It's an American defense technology company that specializes in autonomous systems. Oh, wow. And Palmer Luckey, the creator of the headset Oculus Rift, attended the retreat hosted by Founders Fund, again, by Peter Thiel, where Luckey met Trey Stevens, 30, who had recently persuaded to leave Palantir and join the Founders Fund by its leader, Peter Thiel. Luckey and Stevens discovered a shared interest in seeking defense contracts for companies built like tech startups. And in 2015, the Department of Defense and Department of Homeland Security opened Silicon Valley offices. In 2017, as part of an initiative that had begun the previous year, the Defense Department unveiled the Algorithmic Warfare Cross-Functional Team, known as Project Maven, to harness the latest AI research into battlefield technology, starting with a project to improve image recognition for drones operating in the Middle East. So I bring that up because the irony of Thiel, I keep calling him Peter Thiel, being upset about the state of liberal democracies and any criticism he has of the military-industrial complex. I mean, how can you criticize that when this is literally the foundation of Palantir and the companies you're harnessing? So with that being said, we're going to now dive deeper into this interview. Should be very interesting. And again, keep in mind the entire frame that I just laid out about his contradictions and how, Peter Thiel is really, him and Elon Musk have garnered significant support on the conservative right, if however you want to define American politics, right or left. But the fact that these interviews occur, a lot of people on the conservative side actually listen to this and think that Thiel's kind of speaking for them as, some technologically sophisticated Christian. So anyways, let's dive in here and see where this begins to go. Let's see here. Hold on. All right.
13 or 14 years. You wrote an essay for National Review, the conservative magazine, called The End of the Future. And basically the argument in that essay was that the dynamic, fast-paced, ever-changing modern world was just not nearly as dynamic as people thought. And
so when he responds, remember, this is my framing. I just think it's useful. For Peter Thiel, evil, the forces of evil, is stagnation. It's the prevention of technological advancement and this dynamism and dynamic opportunity that he believes is somehow life-affirming, even though, as we'll see halfway through here, he can't even say assertively that Homo sapiens as biological entities should persist and exist into the future.
Actually, we entered a period of technological stagnation, that sort of digital life was a breakthrough, but not as big a breakthrough as people had hoped, and that sort of the world was kind of stuck, basically. Yes. And you weren't the only person to make arguments like this, but it had a special potency coming from you because you were a Silicon Valley insider who had gotten rich in the digital revolution. So I'm curious, in 2025, right, do you think that diagnosis still holds?
Yes, I still broadly believe in the stagnation thesis. It was never an absolute thesis. So the claim was not that we were absolutely completely stuck. It was in some ways a claim about that the velocity had slowed. It wasn't, zero, but that we were, I don't know, from 1750 to 1970, 200 plus years were periods of accelerating change where we're, relentlessly, we're moving faster. The ships were faster, the rail.
David James Love says, Thiel looks like low on old T cells. Yeah. So if you guys didn't get that, another company that Peter Thiel has now gone defunct, but it was called Ambrosia. It had to do with Ambrosia, the idea of taking blood out of young people, I believe it was like 16 to 25, and then inserting that into people like 40 and older so that their tissue would rejuvenate, which is a real thing, right? And I did a whole stream talking about how this is the modern vampire, right? That now we actually have science that Peter Thiel promotes and had a company that I know is now defunct. I think it was due to a lawsuit or something. I forget exactly. FDA, I think, was involved. But he had a company that would literally put young people's blood into your system, and it would rejuvenate the tissue and make you look younger. Well, now when we hear about myths of witches drinking like young people's and children's blood, adrenochrome, people know what I'm talking about, makes a little bit more sense now. But yeah, he looks incredibly, actually, Axios says the guy looks malnourished. He does look malnourished. There's something unhealthy about like around his eyes. I think looking at someone's eyes is a huge indicator of of their overall general health, and they're just so dark around. I don't know if does he have a sleeping problem? Is he an insomniac? I'm not sure, but the guy, it's meth, bro. Maybe, I'm not sure. Shout out to Jay Hamza, just gifted 5 COTEL Crew memberships. Thank you so much, Jay. God bless you, brother. Thank you so much for your support. And if anybody else is feeling generous, please give some COTEL Crew memberships in the chat. Everybody appreciates that. Thank you so much, Jay. But yeah, the guy definitely looks void of a soul. Maybe. I mean, I feel like, and you guys watch along with me here, doesn't it feel like he never says it? It's never addressed, but with the conservative Christian position he's trying to put forth in this interview. And again, like the second half is really about the Antichrist and his perspective on Antichrist, which is the main thrust of today's stream. But he's got to feel convicted about his like own gay identity, right? Because he's kind of critical about the LGBTQ stuff, the woke culture, the woke movement. I don't know. I feel like the guy is like internally tormented in some way or another.
Roads were faster, the cars were faster, the planes were faster. It culminates in the Concorde and the Apollo missions, and then and then that in all sorts of dimensions, things had slowed. There was, I always made an exception for the world of bits. So we had, computers and software and internet and mobile internet. And then, the last 10, 15 years, you had crypto and the AI revolution, which I think is in some sense pretty big. But the question is, is it enough to really get out of this generalized sense of stagnation? And there's an epistemological question you can start with on the the Back to the Future essays. How do we even know whether we're in stagnation or acceleration? Because one of the features of late modernity is that people are hyper specialized, and so can you say that we're not making progress in physics unless you've devoted half your life to studying string theory? Or what about quantum computers? Or what about cancer research and biotech and the sort of all these verticals? And then how much does progress in cancer count for?
Okay, so he goes on talking about stagnation, and here we're going to skip to 6 minutes.
Let's pick up on that. Why should we want growth and dynamism? Because as you've pointed out in some of your arguments on the subject.
And so this guy, I think he's, I don't know who Ross Douthat is. He kind of seems like a liberal, but I do appreciate his pushback. As you'll see, like moving forward, he gives Thiel more pushback than I've seen in any other interview. It's not significant. It's not a debate, but he challenges a lot of his ideas. And the end point, again, the climax of the interview is when he says, well, don't you see what you're doing with Palantir contributing to the potential rise of the Antichrist? Clearly, this guy's not Christian, nor does he believe in the Christian cosmology or eschatology or worldview. But he makes a point that us Orthodox Christians would absolutely levy at Thiel.
Right. There is a kind of cultural change that happens in the Western world in the 1970s, around the time you think things slow down, start to stagnate, where people become very anxious about the costs of growth, the environmental costs above all.
Yes.
And the idea being, you end up with a widely shared perspective that we're sort of rich enough, and if we try too hard to get that much richer, the planet won't be able to support us. We'll have, degradation of various kinds, and we should be content with where we are. So what's wrong with that argument? Well,
I think there are deep reasons the stagnation happens. So, there are always three questions you ask about history. What actually happened? And there's a question you get to what should be done about it. But there's also this intermediate question, why did it happen? People ran out of ideas. I think to some extent, the institutions degraded and became risk averse, and sort of these cultural transformations we can describe. But then I think to some extent also people had some very legitimate worries about the future, where if we continue to have accelerating progress, were you accelerating towards environmental apocalypse or nuclear apocalypse or things like that? But I think, if we don't find a way back to the future, I do think the society, I don't know, it unravels. It doesn't work.
So again, even though he's going to criticize the sort of modernist project, because he's getting ready to describe the sort of beginning of modernity was leading towards this expectation of unlimited lifespan and utopia. And he's right on that. But he himself, if you listen throughout this, is totally dependent upon technological advance, GDP, like growth as a measure of progress. But what about the moral degradation? What about, again, the familial degradation, the communal degradation of America? This has nothing to do with technology. And in fact, if you're, knowledgeable of McLuhan and some of the technological theories, technology has been one of the biggest catalysts for the isolation of individuals. So more people are isolated today than any other time. Millennials and Gen Z in particular, has like less social gatherings for just general fun, not going to like a concert or like a big gathering, but going bowling with your friends or doing things like that. They have the least relationships of this sort. So technology is doing the exact opposite. John Kell throws in 20, says, God bless DPH, glory to God. Thank you very much, brother. Glory to God indeed. We'll pick up the video later today. Well, thank you so much, John, for the $20 super chat. And Austin DeTulio throws in 20. Thank you so much, Austin. God bless you, brother, with all the support. I really do appreciate that. And Gorilla Biscuits throws in 5, just an Orthodox cross. Thank you so much, Gorilla Biscuits. And Jay Hamza throws in a generous $50. Thank you so much, Jay. He says, I want to point out angels from heaven visit us according to Hebrews. Yes. And you have a guardian angel. Wouldn't it be fair to say that even the fallen angels disguise themselves as people to sow chaos and feed false narratives? Well, certainly they do, but they have to, for a fallen angel to disguise itself as a person, I believe it has to inhabit a person. So do you encounter people that are possessed, whether consciously or not, by demonic activity? And when that person encounters you, is the demon looking at you through that eye, through the eyes of that person? I think that is true. I've seen people that kind of feel like demons can be like a sort of apparition of a man that they can shake their hand and engage with. I don't believe that to be the case, personally, because they're noetic entities. So I don't think, I don't know. Again, I don't want to put a limit on God's mystery. Obviously, there's so many stories of the Old Testament about encounters with the angel of God, the angel of the Lord, which is Christ, and he did take physical form. But I can certainly see saints and elders when they talk about being visited in angels through visions, but taking on physical form, I think that can only be done through possession. And I do think that demons, we do engage with demons and they're inside people. That'd be my perspective on that. But absolutely, in your imagination. So we're being contacted by angels and demons all the time through our imagination, the logisme. So once we begin to accept the warfare, the mental images and the thoughts and the patterns, the demon actually literally begins to take abode within us. And that's why repentance and purity and the sacraments are essential for that cleansing. But anyways, thank you so much, Jay. God bless you, brother, and continue on your ortho journey. Jack the Guitar God says, do we have a guardian angel or just Orthodox? My son asked me, and I wasn't sure of the answer. What is the Orthodox position on this? The Orthodox position is that you get a guardian angel when you're brought into the church. So I've heard people discuss whether people outside the Orthodox Church have a guardian angel. And I would probably just take the position that that is kind of like our position on salvation, you know. But traditionally speaking, the way that the Orthodox Church traditionally understands the role of guardian angels is that you are granted a guardian angel at your baptism. And so this is why, for example, I have an icon of my holy guardian angel right here, the pink and blue one. That is the uncut mountain icon for holy guardian angel. And I got that once I was brought into the church, because that's when, at least we're told, we officially have a holy guardian angel. Does that mean, you know, an angel or the Holy Spirit doesn't protect or look over people outside the church? Again, that's the mystery of God. Of course they do. But specifically in regards to tradition, you are given a holy guardian angel once you're brought into the church, or if you're baptized as an infant, right? Because we do infant baptism. So when you're baptized as an infant, you're already brought into the family of the church. You then have a holy guardian angel. Yeah, exactly. Mr. Smirks makes a great point. And I did a whole review of the movie Nefarious, which is, it was made by Glenn Beck's film company, which, you know, Glenn Beck's a Mormon. And I think there was multiple Mormons in affiliation with the movie Nefarious. But we actually showed the movie Nefarious at one of our men groups meetings last year. And it is surprisingly accurate theologically regarding demonic possession, the role of demons, what they're trying to do, how they take over people. And so we had a really interesting theological conversation with all the men and our priest. We watched the movie Nefarious. So I do think it's a solid film. I do think it's a solid film. Just know that there's a lot of Mormons and evangelicals in relation to it. But as we talked about at church, the theology really isn't that far off. There's a few things that aren't totally accurate, but generally speaking, it was actually one of the better movies. Jay just gifted another 5 COTEL Crew memberships. Jay, God bless you, brother. Thank you so much, man. Really, really appreciate. Really appreciate. Okay, let's continue on here.
The way the middle class, I would define the middle class as the people who expect their kids to do better than themselves. And when that expectation collapses, we no longer have a middle class society. And maybe there's some way you can have a feudal society in which things are always static and stuck, or maybe there's some way you can shift to some radically different society. But it's not the way the Western world. It's not the way the United States has functioned for the first 200 years of its existence.
So you think that ordinary people won't accept stagnation in the end?
It's
that they will rebel and sort of pull things down around them in the course of that rebellion.
They may.
And this is why Thiel essentially is a progressive. Maybe socially he's not progressive, but his whole ethos, his whole view of history is about material progress and that being an advance. And his argument that, the middle class are people that have children that expect to do better. I don't disagree with that type of framing. I mean, yeah. But I don't think the stagnation is why we, as the middle class, I grew up lower middle class, why the middle class is so frustrated. No, dude, like mass immigration, the degradation of family, culture, society. These are not even related to the stagnation specifically that he's talking about. And if you were to go back to a more homogenous, more traditional, even a less technologically sophisticated America, if there was better communities and better social values and connections amongst the inhabitants of our country, we would be more innovative. We would be more creative because those are, again, uncreated energies related to God. We would actually be in a place that would allow us to come to conclusions and innovative insights that actually propel, quote unquote, society forward in his estimation. But he totally divorces any of the spiritual, any of the cultural and the social stuff happening, and just thinks it's about GDP, numbers go up and technology advances. That is not why middle-class people are frustrated. I guarantee if you polled middle-class Americans, they would rather have a more Luddite America that was more homogenous and more traditional and went back, 30, 40 years than where we're at now. So again, for that critique, I think it's just a little bit off. Rebel Umbrian throws in 5, says, I saw Nefarious years ago. I couldn't really take it seriously, though, because I thought the demon looked like Darth Maul. God bless, brother. Thanks, Rebel. I appreciate that. I did not catch that connection when I watched it, but that's funny. Susie Hickson throws in 5, says, love this content. Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Susie. Appreciate you being here. God bless you for the support. All right, let's continue on here.
Rebel, or our institutions don't work,
Yeah, our institutions don't work, but that's not because of technological stagnation. That's because we have total social breakdown amongst our inhabitants, and we have an elite ruling class and entrenched bureaucracy that thinks they deserve to control and dictate the trajectory of our country. There's deeper reasons why we've lost faith in institutions. It's not technological or economic stagnation.
All of our institutions are predicated on growth.
Right. Our budgets are certainly predicated on growth.
Yeah, yes. If you say, Reagan and Obama, Reagan was sort of consumer capitalism, which is oxymoronic. It was, you borrow, you don't save money as a capitalist, you borrow money. And Obama was low tax socialism, just as oxymoronic as, the consumerist capitalism of Reagan. And I like low tax socialism way better than high tax socialism, but I worry that it's not sustainable. At some point, the taxes go up or the socialism ends. So it's deeply, deeply unstable, and that's why people they're not optimistic. They don't think we've hit some stable,
Right.
The Greta future. Maybe it can work.
This is the Greta Thunberg just to be clear, that's a reference to Greta Thunberg, the activist best known for anti-climate change protests, who to you, I would say, represents a kind of symbol of a anti-growth, effectively authoritarian, environmentalist dominated future.
Sure, but we're not there yet. We're not there yet. You know, it'd be like a very, very different society if you really
actually
stuck.
lived in a kind of degrowth, you know, small Scandinavian villages.
I'm not sure it'd be North Korea, but it would be super oppressive.
One thing that's always struck me is that,
well, you know, and I don't disagree in regards to the environmental activism and the progressive left being authoritarian. They absolutely are. The only thing they believe in is power. But to use Greta Thunberg as like the archetype of what we're up against, I think is so incredibly naive when this man literally founded and funded Palantir. Like the disconnect, the cognitive dissonance. It's like, yeah, Greta Thunberg. Yeah, I get it. She's annoying, autist, obsessed, you know, progressive left causes. But, you know, I'm no socialist, but pure capitalism also isn't, you know, just the answer. And that if we actually had a more homogenous society that was under a collective sacred canopy of shared values and historical representatives, cultural idols, if you will, that having a socialist, you know, net within our society to help people, I don't think that's something bad. I think, again, this dialectic that if something is socialist in any regard, that it's inherently bad, that's dumb. That's a dumb thought. I mean, we're Christians. We want to help the poor. Now, obviously, ideally, in the American context, the churches were supposed to provide that role within communities, local communities. And as our religious faith as a nation has dried up, the activism of our churches and our local communities has also dried up, allowing the federal government to come in and, you know, create a welfare state, which they have. But again, blaming like the state of things on socialism, it's like, dude, what? You are totally missing the mark here on like the greater problems of our society. Both political sides are totally controlled. Like, what? AIPAC is a much, much bigger threat to American liberties than Greta Thunberg.
When you have this sense of stagnation, a sense of decadence, right? To use a word that I like to use for it in a society, you then also have people who end up being kind of eager for a crisis, right? Eager for a moment to come along where, you know, they can radically redirect society from the path it's on. Because I tend to think that in rich societies, you hit a certain level of wealth, people become very comfortable, they become risk averse, and it's just hard. It's hard to get out of decadence into something new without a crisis. So the original example for me was after September 11th. There was this whole mentality among foreign policy conservatives that we had been decadent and stagnant, and now is our time to, you know, wake up and launch a new crusade and remake the world. And obviously that ended very badly. But something similar.
But it was Bush 43 just told people to go shopping right away.
So it wasn't anti-decadent enough.
For the most part. So there was some neocon foreign policy enclave in which people were LARPing as a way to get out of decadence. But the dominant thing was Bush 43 people telling people just to go shopping.
So what risks should you be willing to take to escape decadence? It does seem like there's a danger here where the people who want to be anti-decadent have to take on a lot of risk. They have to say, look, you've got this nice, stable, comfortable society, but guess what? We'd like to.
Hey, DG, I think you're on the wrong YouTube channel, bro. There's no exposing Jay Dyer here. And you came to the wrong place if you think that your appeal that Christianity shouldn't be an exclusive form of worship. I'm of the belief that Orthodoxy is the only one true religion. That includes Catholicism and others. So I'm friends with Jay. There's no Jay Dyer exposing here. I apologize. You're going to have to go somewhere where they have Jay derangement syndrome or whatnot. So sorry to break it to you.
To have a war or a crisis or a total reorganization of government and so on. They have to lean into danger, right?
Well, I don't know if I have to answer. I don't know if I have to give you a precise answer, but my directional answer is a lot more.
Yeah.
We should take a lot more risk. We should be doing a lot more. And I don't know, I can go through all these different verticals. It's, if we look at biotech, something like dementia, Alzheimer's, we've made zero progress in 40 to 50 years. People are completely stuck on beta amyloids. It's obviously not working. It's just some kind of a stupid racket where the people are just reinforcing themselves. And so, yes, we need to take way more risk in that department.
Well, I want to ask, to keep us in the concrete, I want to stay with that example for a minute and ask, okay, what does that mean, saying we need to take more risks in anti-aging research? Does it mean that the FDA has to step back and say anyone who has a new treatment for Alzheimer's can, go ahead?
Now, keep this in mind, because Trump's big, beautiful bill, again, last I heard, which was 2 days ago, still had the measure that no state had the authority to write laws against AI or AI development within their states for 10 years. So Peter Thiel here is, again, even though he's gonna hedge his bets, he's on the same side of these tech oligarchs that the federal government needs to stay out of their way so they can actually develop new transhumanist technologies. I mean, for him, life extension is a huge goal.
And sell it on the open market. Like, what is risk in the medical space look like?
Yeah, you would take a lot more risk. If you have some fatal disease, there probably are a lot more risks you can take. There are a lot more risks the researchers can take. Culturally, what I imagine it looks like is early modernity, where people, they thought we would cure diseases. They thought we would have radical life extension. Immortality was part of the project of early modernity. It was Francis Bacon, Condorcet. It was, and maybe it was anti-Christian. Maybe it was downstream of Christianity. It was competitive. If Christianity promised you a physical resurrection, science was not going to succeed unless it promised you the exact same thing. But I don't know. I remember 1999, 2000, when we were running PayPal. One of my co-founders, Luke Nosek, he was into Alcor and cryonics, and people should freeze themselves. And
Alcor is the leading researcher right now in cryonics, Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm sorry, and it's Max Moore, who's considered the philosopher of transhumanism. One of the leading philosophers with Nick Bostrom. That's where he does a lot of his research and work. People like Bill Gates, these elites, they've already have paid that the cryonics at Alcor. They, freeze these people at incredibly low temperatures and liquid nitrogen, thinking that the measures that Thiel is advocating for will be able to revive them, bring back them to life, replace their neurons with synthetic parts, this type of thing.
And we had one day where we took the whole company to a freezing party, a Tupperware party. People sell Tupperware policies at a freezing party.
They sell their. Was it just your heads? What was going to be frozen?
You could get a full body or just a head.
The head was cheaper.
It was disturbing when the dot matrix printer didn't quite work, and so the freezing policies couldn't be printed out. But in retrospect, this was still
technological stagnation once again, right?
But it was but it's also a symptom of the decline, because in 1999, this was not a mainstream view, but there was still a fringe boomer view where they still believed they could live forever. And that was the last generation. So I'm always anti-boomer, but maybe there's something we've lost even in this fringe boomer narcissism, where there were at least a few boomers who still, believed science would cure all their diseases. No one who's a millennial believes that anymore.
I think there are some people who believe in a different kind of immortality, though, right now. I think part of the fascination with AI is connected to a specific vision of transcending limits. And I'm going to ask you about that after I ask you about politics. Because one of the striking things I thought about your original argument on stagnation, which was mostly about technology and the economy, was that it could be applied to a pretty wide range of things. And at the time you were writing that essay, you were interested in seasteading,
Sure.
this ideas of essentially building new polities independent of the sclerotic Western world. But then you made a pivot in the 2010s. So you were, one of the few prominent, maybe the only prominent Silicon Valley supporter of Donald Trump. In 2016, you supported a few sort of carefully selected Republican Senate candidates. One of them is now the Vice President of the United States. And my view as an observer of what you were doing was that you were basically being a kind of venture capitalist for politics, right? You were saying, here are some disruptive agents who might change the political status quo, and it's worth a certain kind of risk here. Is that how you thought about
Sure,
that?
there were all sorts of levels. I mean, one level was these hopes that we could redirect the Titanic from the iceberg was heading to, or whatever the metaphor is, really change course as a society. Through political maybe
change.
Much narrower aspiration was that we could maybe at least have a conversation about this. When someone like Trump said, "Make America Great Again," okay, is that a positive, optimistic, ambitious agenda, or is it merely, a very pessimistic assessment of where we are, that we are no longer a great country? And I didn't have great expectations about what Trump would do in a positive way, but I thought at least for the first time in 100 years, we had a Republican who was not giving us this syrupy Bush nonsense, and that was not the same as progress, but we could at least have a conversation. In retrospect, this was a preposterous fantasy. I had these two thoughts, and in 2016, and you often have these ideas that are just below the level of your sort of consciousness. But the two thoughts I had that I wasn't able to combine was, number one, nobody would be mad at me for supporting Trump if he lost, and number two, I thought he had a 50-50 chance of winning. And then I had this implicit.
Why would nobody be mad at you if he lost?
It would just be such a weird thing, and it wouldn't really matter.
Okay.
But then I thought, I thought he had a 50-50 chance because the problems were deep and the stagnation was frustrating. And then the fantasy I had was, if he won, we could have this conversation. And the reality was people weren't ready for it. And then maybe we've progressed to the point where
people weren't ready for a conversation on stagnation. Again, I have many criticisms of Trump, but nobody can doubt that the first administration, at least according to Trump, he's notorious at hiring the wrong people. We've even seen this in the second Trump administration, but according to Trump himself, the first administration, that he was misled by the deep state, by the people around him, by the entrenched bureaucracies to hire people that were part of the team in opposition against him. Of course, we know the Russiagate, all that stuff was fake, the dossier, but stagnation. What was the point?
Because the problems were deep and the stagnation was frustrating, and then the fantasy I had was, if you won, we could have this conversation, and the reality was people.
To have a conversation. Now, the point isn't that people were not unwilling to have the conversation. The point is that Palantir, during that administration, was still, again, contracted with the CIA, the entire military industrial complex, all the three-letter agencies. And so it's like, how is that not the problem? The problem was that the MAGA supporters, the populace, wasn't ready for a conversation about American stagnation. No, dude. No, it has to do with the power dynamics and the elite and the money players in our country, and that Thiel is literally part of them. He's one of them. Like, it's such a false narrative to put the onus that America just wasn't ready for the conversation about stagnation. What? No, dude. No, absolutely not. There's deeper problems here, and again, the enterprises and businesses that he supports and helps fund and build, they're tied with the entrenched establishment that he then is out here criticizing.
People weren't ready for it. And then maybe we've progressed to the point where we can have this conversation at this point in 2025, a decade after Trump. And of course, you're not sort of a zombie left-wing person, Ross, but this is.
I've been called many things, Peter.
I'll take whatever progress I can get.
So from your perspective so let's say there's two layers, right? There's sort of a basic sense of, this society needs disruption. It needs risk. Trump is disruption. Trump is risk. And the second level is Trump is actually willing to say things that are true about American decline, right? So do you feel like you, as an investor, as a venture capitalist, got anything out of the first Trump term? Like what did Trump do in his first term that you felt was anti-decadent or anti-stagnation? If anything, maybe the answer is nothing.
Well, I think it took longer and it was slower. I think than I would have liked, but I think we have gotten to the place where a lot of people think something's gone wrong, and that was not the conversation I was having in 2012, 2013, 2014. I had a debate with Eric Schmidt in 2012 and Mark Andreessen in 2013 and Bezos in 2014. I was on there's a stagnation problem. And all three of them were versions of, everything's going great. And I think at least those three people have, to varying degrees, updated and adjusted. Silicon Valley's adjusted.
And Silicon Valley, though, has more than adjusted. A big part of Silicon Valley
on the stagnation,
right?
Question,
On the stagnation,
on the stagnation
but then a big part of Silicon Valley ended up going in for Trump in 2024, including, obviously, most famously, Elon Musk.
Yeah, and this is deeply linked to the stagnation issue in my telling. I mean, and these things are always super complicated, but my telling is, I don't, and again, I'm so hesitant to speak for all these people, but, someone like Mark Zuckerberg or Facebook Meta, and, in some ways, I don't think he's very ideological. He didn't think this stuff necessarily through that much. It was the default was to be liberal, and it was always if the liberalism isn't working, what do you do? And for year after year after year, it was you do more. If something doesn't work, you just need to do more of it, and you up the dose and you up the dose, and you spend hundreds of millions of dollars, and you go completely woke, and everybody hates you, and at some point, it's like, okay, maybe this isn't working.
So they pivot.
Yeah,
right?
So it's not a pro-Trump thing.
It's not a pro-Trump thing, but it is,
As you kind of just gave again, we talked about the Trump administration is basically an agreement between the Zionists, the MAGA populists, again, not that the MAGA voter has any say in this, but Trump and the people around him, and Silicon Valley oligarchs. And what Thiel just basically said is that they supported Trump not because they're pro-Trump per se, or they're pro-nationalist, or they're pro-populism. It's because of the stagnation thing, which really is just a facade for the fact that stagnation is the inability to build the technocratic society that they want, that they think is going to make us spacefaring and lead us towards this next phase of life extension and transhumanism. Stagnation is the barrier preventing Thiel from his technocratic dreams. He is a believer in the singularity. So stagnation is just the thing that's preventing them from getting there. It has nothing and that's what I said about Elon Musk. And you look at his companies and you look at Doge and Neuralink. Like, Doge was to make the US government more efficient, which is great. Cut out spending. They didn't do a great, there's a lot more that they, again, if they were truly in that cause, should have got. But the point is that these technocrats need an efficient America. They need an economic engine so that they can build their technocratic dreams. And that's why the alliance with Trump, that's why they're in favor of, domestic production. It has nothing to do with actual care for American citizens or the health of the nation. It has to do with their stagnation problem is them unable to install the full technocratic surveillance system they think that we need.
Just both in public and private conversations, it is a kind of sense that Trumpism and populism in 2024, maybe not in 2016, when Peter was out there as the the lone supporter, but now in 2024, they can be a vehicle for technological innovation economic dynamism and so on. That's
you're framing it really optimistically here. So
well, the people, but I think I know you're pessimistic.
When you frame it this optimistically, you're just saying these people are going to be disappointed and they're just set up for failure, and things like this.
People expressed a lot of optimism. That's all I'm saying. Elon Musk expressed a lot of. He expressed some apocalyptic anxieties about how budget deficits were going to kill us all. But he came into government, and people around him came into government basically saying, we have a partnership with the Trump administration, and we're pursuing technological greatness. I think they were optimistic.
Yes.
And so you're coming from a place of greater pessimism or realism. So what I'm asking for is your assessment of where we are, not their assessment, but like, does populism in Trump 2.0 look like a vehicle for technological dynamism to you?
It's still by far the best option we have. I don't know, is Harvard going to cure dementia by just puttering along, doing the same thing that hasn't worked for 50 years? So that's
just a case for it can't get worse. Let's do disruption, right? But the critique of populism right now would be Silicon Valley made an alliance with the populists, but in the end, the populists don't care about science. They don't want to spend money on science. They want to kill funding to Harvard just because they don't like Harvard, right?
Again, what a dumb leftist. Somebody said he's voicing the boomer perspective. Maybe from the left, the idea that the average like MAGA supporter is like anti-science. What is this? Like, what is this rhetoric? It's like it takes me back to like the 1990s or something, or it's just so dumb. That the point is that the MAGA is not anti-science, and the tech oligarchs hitch their wagon to Trump, but the base doesn't in favor of scientific research. They don't know what the scientific method is. No, what? No, it has to do with, somebody says we're anti-scientism. Absolutely. But the problems are so much deeper. To even categorize like the MAGA base and the Trump supporter in such like dumb characteristics, like it's totally missing again the cultural phenomenon that's happening here. So you have, in a sense, two people that are kind of out of touch, and yet they're still following the same news cycle and events that we're looking at.
And in the end, you're not going to get the kind of investments in the future that Silicon Valley wanted. Is that wrong?
Yeah, but we have to go back to this question of how well is the science working in the background. This is where the New Dealers, whatever was wrong with them, they pushed science hard, and you funded it, you gave money to people, and you scaled it, and whereas today, if there was an equivalent of Einstein and he wrote a letter to the White House, it would get lost in the mailroom, and the Manhattan Project is unthinkable. If we call something a moonshot, this is the way Biden talked about, let's say, cancer research. A moonshot in the 60s still meant that you went to the moon. A moonshot now means something completely fictional that's never going to happen. Oh, you need a moonshot for that. It's not.
Well, did we go to the moon? Maybe it's being used in its proper context.
Not like we need an Apollo program. It means it's never, ever going to happen. And so,
but it seems like then you're still in the mode of, for you, as opposed to maybe for some other people in Silicon Valley, the value of populism is in tearing away the veils and illusions. And we're not necessarily in the stage where you're looking to the Trump administration to build to do the Manhattan Project, to do the moonshot. It's more like populism helps us see that it was all fake.
You need to try to do both. And they're very entangled with each other. And I don't know, there's a deregulation of nuclear power, and at some point we'll get back to building, new nuclear power plants or better designed ones, or maybe even fusion reactors. And so yes, there's a deregulatory, deconstructive part, and then at some point you actually get to construction, and it's all things like that. So yeah, in some ways you're clearing the field, and
but you've personally stopped funding politicians.
I am schizophrenic on this stuff. I think it's incredibly important, and it's incredibly toxic. And so I go back and forth on.
Again, there's like another one of his hypocrisies and contradictions. Like, it's incredibly toxic that, billionaires and people with immense money can actually pay off politicians, but I still do it. I still have my own candidates. I just sometimes I think about, man, this is really toxic. But yeah, other times I pay them, and I make sure I get my people in the positions I want. But it's like, well, either it's bad or it's not.
Incredibly toxic for you personally,
for everybody who gets involved. It's zero sum. It's crazy. And then in some ways,
because everyone hates you and associates you with Trump. Like, how is it toxic for you personally?
It's toxic because it's in a zero sum world. The stakes in it feel really, really high, and
you end up having enemies you didn't have before.
It's toxic for all the people who get involved in different ways. There is a political dimension of getting back to the future. You can't, I don't know. This is a conversation I had with Elon back in 2024, and we had all these conversations. I had the seasteading version with Elon where I said, Trump doesn't win, I want to just leave the country. And then Elon said, "There's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to go. This is the only place." And then you always think of the right arguments to make later. And it was about 2 hours after we had dinner and I was home that I thought of, wow, Elon, you don't believe in going to Mars anymore. 2024 is the year where Elon stopped believing in Mars, not as a silly science tech project, but as a political project. Mars was supposed to be a political project. It was building an alternative. And in 2024, Elon came to believe that if you went to Mars, the socialist US government, the woke AI, it would follow you to Mars. It was the Demis meeting with Elon that we sort of brokered. He was doing DeepMind.
This is an AI company.
Yeah, this was the rough conversation was, Demis tells Elon, "I'm working on the most important project in the world. I'm building a superhuman AI." And Elon responds to Demis, "Well, I'm working on the most important project in the world. I am turning us into interplanetary species." And then Demis said, "Well, my AI will be able to follow you to Mars." And then Elon sort of went quiet. But in my telling of the history, it took years for that to really hit Elon. It took him till 2024 to process it.
But that doesn't mean he doesn't believe in Mars. It just means that he decided he had to win some kind of battle over budget deficits or wokeness to get to Mars.
What does Mars mean? Is it and again, it's...
What does Mars mean?
Well, is it just a scientific project, or is it, I don't know, is it like a
vision of a new society?
Yeah, Heinlein,
populated by many
libertarian
people
paradise
descended
or something
from
like this.
Elon Musk.
Well,
right,
I don't know if it was concretized that specifically, but if you concretize things, then maybe you realize that Mars is supposed to be more than a science project. It's supposed to be a political project. And then when you concretize it, you have to start thinking through, well, the woke AI will follow you, the socialist government will follow you. And then maybe you have to do something other than...
That's nice and all, but Grok is also pretty woke on a variety of topics. So, it's famous. What was it, 4 or 5 years ago when Elon smoked the joint on Joe Rogan podcast? And in that conversation, he talked about the apocalyptic scenario of AI and why it's so dangerous and how he thinks we have a very small chance of surviving. And then, as I've talked to you more recently, Tesla AI is leading the world right now in applicable robotics. So one could say, according to Thiel's presentation here, that Elon changed his tune and now decided that he also need to get into the AI arms race so that it isn't quote unquote woke, but Grok is basically the same. So yeah, they're constantly reprogramming Grok all the time to be woke. Yeah, especially on, certain topics that I'm sure you could come to a conclusion on what they may be. And so what are you talking about? It's just, this is just a race amongst individuals of immense wealth and power to make sure it's their vision and their narrative that moves forward. I mean, that's what Musk is doing. He's just racing other people through his companies and his investments so that he leads, Starlink is going to lead the state of internet access. Neuralink is going to lead the state of brain computer interface. Tesla is going to lead in regards to EVs, right? The goal is he's creating companies to set a precedent so he can monopolize the next phase of global economics, right? And the technocratic control system.
And just going to Mars.
Okay, so the woke AI. Artificial intelligence seems like one, if we're still stagnant, it's the biggest exception to stagnation.
Yes.
It's the place where there's been remarkable progress, surprising to many people progress. It's also the place, we were just talking about politics, it's the place where the Trump administration is, I think, to a large degree, giving AI investors a lot of what they wanted in terms of both stepping.
Absolutely. And that is part of Project Stargate. Remember, I did a stream actually with Jay Dyer on his channel talking about Project Stargate when it revolved around the 1980 CIA project for remote viewing. Ironic that remote viewing is also tied with the new AI arms race that, again, Project Stargate is a $500 billion investment with Larry Ellison of Oracle, Sam Altman, and then the Japanese CEO of SoftBank, I believe, is those three gentlemen. So $500 billion federal investment into AI. I think Trump definitely conceded to some of the tech oligarchs. I think that's a fair statement.
Back and doing public-private partnerships. So it's a zone of progress and governmental engagement. And you are an investor in AI. What do you think you're investing in?
Well, I don't know. There's sort of a lot of layers to this. So I do think I don't know. There's one question we can frame is just how big it.
What you think the guy that has this much money could have a speech pathologist? Like, just. I get it. Maybe you had a stuttering problem. Maybe this is something that's plagued you your whole life. But dude, if you're a billionaire, like, get a speech pathologist. Like, can we get a thought out without stuttering?
A thing. Do I think AI is? And it's, I don't know. My stupid answers. It's more than a nothing burger, and it's less than.
And by the way, for those watching, this is actually a much better interview of Peter Thiel. Like, if you're worried about his stuttering or you get annoyed with it like I do sometimes, he's actually speaking very clearly in this interview compared to other ones where the stuttering is out of control.
The total transformation of our society. So my placeholder is that it's roughly on the scale of the internet in the late 90s, which is, I'm not sure it's enough to really end the stagnation. It might be enough to create some great companies. And, the internet added maybe a few percentage points to the GDP, maybe 1% to GDP growth every year for 10, 15 years. It added some to productivity. And so that's sort of roughly my placeholder for AI. It's the only thing we have. It's a little bit unhealthy that it's so unbalanced. This is the only thing we have. I'd like to have more multidimensional progress. I'd like us to be going to Mars. I'd like us to be having cures for dementia. If all we have is AI, I will take it. There are risks with it. There are dangers with this technology.
So you're a skeptic. But then you are a skeptic of what you might call the sort of superintelligence cascade theory, which basically says that if AI succeeds, it gets so smart that it gives us the progress in the world of atoms, that it's like, all right, we can't cure dementia. We can't, figure out how to build the perfect factory that builds the rockets that go to Mars, but the AI can. And at a certain point, you pass a certain threshold and it gives us not just more digital progress, but 64 other forms of progress. It sounds like you don't believe that. or you think that's less likely?
Yeah, I somehow don't know if that's been really the gating factor.
What does that mean? The gating factor?
It's probably a Silicon Valley ideology, and maybe in a weird way, it's more liberal than a conservative thing. But people are really fixated on IQ in Silicon Valley, and that it's all about smart people.
Right.
And if you have more smart people, they'll do great things. And then the economics anti-IQ argument is that people actually do worse. The smarter they are, the worse they do. And it's just they don't know how to apply it, or our society doesn't know what to do with them, and they don't fit in. And so that suggests that the gating factor isn't IQ, but something that's deeply wrong with our society. So
is that a limit?
Well, and this is a residue again of the Enlightenment, the elevation of reason as the sole source and authority of knowledge and of certainty. It's kind of a presupposition of even the modern Silicon Valley elite that are so obsessed with IQ, pattern recognition, and that IQ, this is the basis for their functionalist theories, that if whatever we can do, if there's a functional equivalent of the computer, then the computer is functionally the same level of intelligence. And this is how they're measuring, and this is their grand theory about a sentient AI, is that functionally it will be identical. But again, that reduces human anthropology and the essence of personhood to pattern recognition, which I think is false from the get-go. That's why I don't believe in sentient AI as a possibility. In the fact that they're equating the bridge between their anthropology and their computer construction is it's an IQ bridge. It's a pattern recognition bridge. It's a functionalist bridge, a philosophy of mind theory. So it's like, that's not what constitutes a human person. We are way more complex. And in fact, this is where the eugenics residue of transhumanism is still present. Because eugenics was, they were trying to find objective measuring systems to evaluate the different races and ethnicities of the planet. And IQ was one of the barometers that they tended to focus on and there are IQ differences. Read the bell curve if you're not familiar with that. However, especially from a Christian perspective and belief in the Imago Dei, Genesis 1:26, we cannot be just reduced to a system of pattern recognition, essentially a biological algorithm, which is what Dadaism is professing in Homo Deus by Yuval Noah Harari.
On intelligence, or a problem of the sort of personality types that human superintelligence creates? I mean, I'm very sympathetic to the idea, and I made this case when I did an episode of this podcast with a sort of AI accelerationist, that just throwing that certain problems can just be solved if you ramp up intelligence. It's like we ramp up intelligence and boom, Alzheimer's is solved. We ramp up intelligence and the AI can, figure out the automation process that builds you 1 billion robots overnight. I'm an intelligence skeptic in the sense I don't think. Yeah, I think you probably have limits.
It's hard to prove one way. It's always hard to prove these things, but
until we have the superintelligence.
I share your intuition, because I think we've had a lot of smart people and things have been stuck for other reasons. And so maybe the problems are unsolvable, which is the pessimistic view. Maybe there is no cure for dementia at all, and it's a deeply unsolvable problem. There's no cure for mortality. Maybe it's an unsolvable problem. Or maybe it's these cultural things. So it's not the individually smart person, but it's how this fits into our society. Do we tolerate heterodox smart people? Maybe you need heterodox smart people to do crazy experiments. And if the AI is just conventionally smart, if we define wokeness again, wokeness is too ideological, but if you just define it as conformist, maybe that's not the kind of smartness that's going to make a difference.
So do you fear then a plausible future where AI in a way becomes itself stagnationist, that it's like highly intelligent, creative in a conformist way? It's like, the Netflix algorithm. It makes infinite okay movies that people watch. It generates infinite okay ideas. it puts a bunch of people out of work and makes them obsolete, but it doesn't, it like deepens stagnation in some way. Is that a fear?
It's
like people just outsource.
It's quite possible that that's certainly a risk, but I guess where I end up is I still think we should be trying AI, and that the alternative is just total stagnation. So yeah, there's sort of all sorts of interesting things can happen with, okay, maybe drones in a military context are combined with AI, and okay, this is kind of scary or dangerous or dystopian, or it's going to change things. But if you don't have AI, wow, there's just nothing going on. And I don't know, there's like a version of this discussion on the internet where did the internet lead to more conformity and more wokeness? And yeah, there are all sorts of ways where it didn't lead to quite the cornucopian, diverse explosion of ideas that libertarians fantasized about in 1999. But counterfactually, I would argue that it was still better than the alternative. That if we hadn't had the internet, maybe it would have been worse. AI is better. It's better than the alternative, and the alternative is nothing at all. Because here's one place where the stagnationist arguments are still reinforced. The fact that we're only talking about AI, I feel, is always an implicit acknowledgement that, but for AI, we are like in almost total stagnation.
But the world of AI is clearly filled with people who, at the very least, seem to have a more utopian, transformative, whatever word you want to call it, view of the technology than you're expressing here, right? And you were mentioned earlier the idea that the modern world used to promise radical life extension and doesn't anymore. It seems very clear to me that a number of people deeply involved in artificial intelligence see it as a kind of mechanism for transhumanism, for transcendence of our mortal flesh, and either some kind of creation of a successor species or some kind of merger of mind and machine. And do you think that's just all kind of irrelevant fantasy? Or do you think it's just hype? Do you think people are trying to raise money by pretending that we're going to build a machine god, right? Is it hype? Is it delusion? Is it something you worry about? I think you would prefer the human race to endure, right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
yes?
I don't know. I would.
This is a long hesitation.
Imagine that he asked, "Do you want the human species to exist?" And well, one thing I would like is, I don't know, maybe, I mean, yeah.
This is a long hesitation.
There's so many questions implicit in this.
Should the human race survive?
Yes.
Okay.
But I also would I also would like us to radically solve these problems.
Right.
And so it's always, I don't know.
How is that the alternative? Do you want the human race to survive? Well, I want them to radically solve these problems. Don't they have to survive and exist to solve the problems? It's because he knows that his vision is ultimately transhuman. And so that's where he's like trying to toe the line here. Yeah, he wants the humans to exist in a transhuman form so that they can solve his utopian problems.
Transhumanism is this, the ideal was this radical transformation where your human natural body gets transformed into an immortal body. And there's a critique of, let's say, the trans people in a sexual context, or a transvestite is someone who changes their clothes and cross dresses, and a transsexual is someone where you change your penis into a vagina. and we can then debate how well those surgeries work. But we want more transformation than that. The critique is not that it's weird and unnatural. It's so pathetically little. And okay, we want more than cross-dressing or changing your sex or.
He's like, just me as a gay man. The transvestites and the transsexuals I hang out with, it's just not enough. It's just not enough. We have to go further, the penises that turn into vaginas. I'd say it's not enough. I mean, when I like a woman, she has to have XY chromosomes, but we need more change than just transvestites and transsexuals.
Organs. We want you to be able to change your heart and change your mind and change your whole body. And then Orthodox Christianity, by the way.
Oh, tell us, Peter, what is it about Orthodox Christianity that's so insightful to this transvestite and transsexual conversation?
The critique Orthodox Christianity has of this is these things don't go far enough. Like that transhumanism is just changing your body, but you also need to transform your soul. And you need to transform your whole self.
Oh, so this is the Christian Transhumanist Association, the CTAs, again, a hodgepodge taking of theosis and saying, well, transhumanism is theosis. It's a total transformation of the human. Okay, and here we're seeing the same rhetoric out of Peter Thiel. Oh, well, Orthodox Christianity, believes in like a total transformation of the person. Yeah, that's spiritual and it's biologically instantiated. This isn't something that just happens by a technological transformation.
And so,
right, but the other wait. I generally agree with what I think is your belief that religion should be a friend to science and ideas of scientific progress. I think any idea of divine providence has to encompass the fact that we have progressed and achieved and done things that would have been unimaginable to our ancestors. But it still also seems like, the promise of Christianity in the end is you get the perfected body and the perfected soul through God's grace. And the person who tries to do it on their own with a bunch of machines is likely to end up as a dystopian character.
True. So who would have thought the liberal boomer would actually be able to steelman our position better than the Christian Peter Thiel?
Well, let's articulate this.
And you can have a heretical form of Christianity, that says something else.
I don't know. I think the word nature does not occur once in the Old Testament, and so.
So this is his argument that Christianity doesn't value a natural human body over transhumanist body.
If you and there is a word in which a sense in which the way I understand the Judeo-Christian inspiration is
Judeo-Christian. Here we go. You guys are definitely going to get something really insightful and traditional.
It is about transcending nature. It is about overcoming things. And,
you transcend the fall of nature, but it's through natural means. It's through the way in which God created the universe. It's not through transhumanism.
And the closest thing you can say to nature is that people are fallen and that's the natural thing.
No, it's actually unnatural. It's the state of nature itself, but that was not the full intention of nature. So nature in its true ideal natural form is not fallen. The
Christian sense is that you're messed up, and that's true. But there's some ways that with God's help, you are supposed to transcend that and overcome that. And
right.
But if you just
present company accepted, most of the people working to build the hypothetical machine god don't think that they're cooperating with Yahweh, Jehovah, the Lord of hosts. They think that they're building immortality
Ross,
on their own.
Yeah,
right?
We're jumping around a lot of things. So
Yes.
again, the critique I was saying is they're not ambitious enough.
Right.
From a Christian point of view, these people are not ambitious enough.
There you go. From a Christian point of view, Silicon Valley, AI development, and transhumanism is not ambitious enough. The Christians view the transvestites and the transsexuals as not ambitious enough. You guys have heard it here. Peter Thiel, your Christian prophet, telling you that if you're a Christian, you actually see these people as not going far enough. We need to go further.
Now, then we get into this question. Well, are they
but they're not morally and spiritually ambitious enough.
And are they still physically ambitious enough? And are they even still really transhumanists? And this is where, okay, the cryonics thing, that seems like a retro thing from 1999. There isn't that much of that going on. So they're not transhumanists on a physical body. And then, okay, well, maybe it's not about cryonics. Maybe it's about uploading. Which, okay, well, it's not quite. I'd rather have my body. I don't want just a computer program that simulates me. So that uploading.
I agree.
President-elect says Peter speaks for Christians now. Well, yes. If you haven't seen since, what was it, 6 months ago, I did a video on Peter Thiel with an interview he did with the Hoover Institute at Stanford. And that's where he really came out and professed himself as a Christian. And he's worried about the Antichrist. And he thinks that we need to normalize Christian eschatological rhetoric. And so, yeah, I mean, is he Christian? I wouldn't consider him one. But has he been utilizing his platform and voice to be a voice for Christians in regards to tech and AI? Yes, he has been. So if you didn't know, yes, he certainly has been presenting himself as that.
Seemed like a step down from cryonics, but then even that's, it's part of the conversation, and this is where it gets very hard to score. And I don't want to say they're all making it up and it's all fake, but I don't think
you think some of it's fake.
I don't think it's fake. Implies people are lying, but it's I want to say it's not the center of gravity.
Yeah.
And so there is there is a cornucopian language, there's an optimistic language. A conversation I had with Elon, a few weeks ago about this was he said, we're going to have 1 billion humanoid robots in the US in 10 years. And I said, well, if that's true, you don't need to worry about the budget deficits because we're going to have so much growth. The growth will take care of this. And then, he's still worried about the budget deficits. And then this doesn't prove that he doesn't believe in the 1 billion robots, but it suggests that, maybe he hasn't thought it through, or that he doesn't think it's going to be as transformative economically, or that there are big error bars around it. But yeah, there's some way in which these things are not quite thought through. If I had to give a critique of Silicon Valley, it's always bad at what the meaning of tech is, and the conversations, they tend to go into this microscopic thing where it's like, what are the IQ ELO scores of the AI, and exactly how do you define AGI, and we get into all these endless technical debates. And there are a lot of questions that are at an intermediate level of meaning that seem to me to be very important, which is like, what does it mean for the budget deficit? What does it mean for the economy? What does it mean for geopolitics? One of the conversations we had a few recently was you and I had was does it change the calculus for China invading Taiwan, where if we have an accelerating AI revolution in the military, is China falling behind? And will this, and maybe on the optimistic side, it deters China because they've effectively lost. And on the pessimistic side, it accelerates them because they know it's now or never. If they don't grab Taiwan now, they will fall behind. And either way, this is a pretty important thing. It's not thought through. We don't think about what AI means for geopolitics.
and this is where, again, you can see the sentiments align with essentially the military-industrial complex. I'm not saying China is not a threat. Anybody who's saw like their 100 to 200 year plan for the destruction of the United States, I mean, they're thinking long term, and they are an existential threat to some degree. But I'm against, as an American and nationalist, I'm against us being this global military police. And we need to let these things kind of work themselves out. But he's very big on the threat of China, and they are a threat. I'm not downplaying that China doesn't have nefarious intentions and plans, but who do you think then is trying to monitor this situation? Palantir, right? I mean, is it really that far off from like the neocon talking points? I mean, we need to invest in this nation, and our biggest threat is China may take Taiwan, and then it gets back to the superconductors and all that stuff that Taiwan's able to make. It's like, I think we have other problems as well.
We don't think about what it means for the macro economy, and those are the kinds of questions I'd want us to push more.
There's also a very macroscopic question that you're interested in, that we'll pull on the religion thread a little bit here. You have been giving talks recently about the concept of the Antichrist, which is a Christian concept, an apocalyptic concept. What does that mean to you? What is the Antichrist?
How much time do we have?
We've got...
Okay, here we go. So he's got Bible verses. He's going to now present his Christian case for the Antichrist being basically some blue-haired liberal who runs a one-world government and prevents technological advancement. I mean, he doesn't use those terms, but just listen now to how he describes what the Antichrist would be.
As much time as you have to talk about the Antichrist.
All right. Well, I could talk about it for a long time. I think there's always a question. How do we articulate, some of these existential risks, some of the challenges we have, and they're all framed as sort of runaway dystopian science text. There's a risk of nuclear war. There's a risk of environmental disaster, maybe something specific like climate change, although there are lots of other ones we could come up with. There's a risk of, bioweapons. You have all the different sci-fi scenarios. Obviously, there are certain types of risks with AI. But I always think that if we're going to have this frame of talking about existential risks, perhaps we should also talk about the risk of another type of a bad singularity, which I would describe as the one world totalitarian state. Because I would say the political solution, the default political solution people have for all these existential risks is one world governance. What do you do about nuclear weapons? We have a United Nations with real teeth that controls them, and they're controlled by an international political order. And then something like this, is also what do we do about AI? And we need global compute governance. We need a one world government to control all the computers, log every single keystroke.
Again, mind you, he's now going to, once he gets pushed back here in a few minutes, he's going to reject the idea that the technologies and the companies he's investing in are actually contributing to what he's describing right now. So for him, it's all about a centralized political governmental control that he believes is going to be like woke left, progressive, and stagnant in regards to his stuff. And the irony is that if anybody were to create or even move towards creating a total centralized government, they're going to need all the tools that he himself is aiding to be built right now. And yet he sees no connection between these.
To make sure people don't program, a dangerous AI. And I've been wondering whether that's sort of a, going from, the frying pan into the fire. And so the atheist philosophical framing is one world or none. That was a short film that was put out by the Federation of American Scientists in the late 40s. Starts with a nuclear bomb blowing up the world. And obviously you need a one world government to stop it, one world or none. And the Christian framing, which in some ways is the same question, is Antichrist or Armageddon. You have the one world state of the Antichrist, or we're sleepwalking towards Armageddon.
What? What eschatological frame says that we have to choose between the Antichrist and Armageddon? Both events are going to occur. What? We don't have to choose one or the other.
One world or none, Antichrist or Armageddon, on one level are the same question. Now, I have a lot of thoughts on this topic, but sort of one question is, and this was a plot hole in all these Antichrist books people wrote. How does the Antichrist take over the world? He gives these demonic, hypnotic speeches, and people just fall for it. And so it's this plot hole. It's this daemonium.
Right. It's implausible.
It's a very implausible plot hole.
Right.
But I think we have an answer to this plot hole. The way the Antichrist would take over the world is you talk about Armageddon nonstop. You talk about existential risk nonstop. And this is what you need to regulate. It's the...
Wait. Wasn't the first 3/4 of this interview about Peter Thiel talking about the existential threat of stagnation, the existential threat of China, the existential threat of the lack of innovation and where liberal democracies and the status quo is moving us towards? That's where the framing on what he says the Antichrist would do. Now, obviously, Peter Thiel is not the Antichrist. Elon Musk is not the Antichrist. Donald Trump is not the Antichrist. But Peter Thiel, at least within the theological framing he's presented here, is certainly presenting something that is similar to the spirit of Antichrist. I mean, the delusion, and I would say the sort of spiritual prelest that he sees the things he invests in and what he's doing is totally unconnected with a potential rise of an Antichrist figure. It's like, dude, how do you not see that? How do you not see that Palantir and automated AI military equipment would be used for a certain group of people to take over the planet? What do you mean?
Opposite of the picture of Baconian science from the 17th, 18th century, where, the Antichrist is like some evil tech genius, evil scientist who invents this machine to take over the world. People are way too scared for that. In our world, the thing that has political resonance is the opposite.
But that's what we just talked about, how many people view AI being that machine. He just said people won't buy into, the machine. What we just, again, throughout this conference, we just talked about the state of AI, and that certainly some people developing and many people using have the expectation that AI is going to be a sort of mechanical god. What?
It is the thing that has political resonance is we need to stop science. We need to just say stop to this. And this is where, I don't know, in the 17th century, I can imagine a Dr. Strangelove, Edward Teller type person taking over the world. In our world, it's far more likely to be Greta Thunberg.
That is so naive. That is so naive for somebody that is in those elite circles, gone to the Bilderberg groups, knows, has rubbed shoulders with the elite of the world, that our biggest threat is the Greta Thunberg. She's more likely to be an Antichrist figure. No. He literally admitted about his schizophrenia regarding lobbyist groups and how American politics work because wealthy people can influence it. How dare you? How dare you, Peter Thiel?
Okay, I want to suggest a middle ground between those two options. It used to be that the reasonable fear of the Antichrist was a kind of wizard of technology. And now the reasonable fear is someone who promises to control technology, make it safe, and sort of usher in what, from your point of view, would be a kind of universal stagnation, right?
Well, it's more, that's more my description of how it would happen.
Right.
So I think people still have a fear of a 17th century Antichrist.
Yes.
We're still
Right,
scared of Dr. Strangelove.
Right, but you're saying the real Antichrist would play on that fear and
Yes.
say, you
Yes.
must come with me to avoid Skynet, to avoid the Terminator, to avoid nuclear Armageddon.
Yes.
And I guess my view would be, looking at the world right now, that you would need a certain kind of novel technological progress to make that fear concrete, right? So I can buy that the world could turn to someone who promised peace and regulation if the world became convinced that AI was about to destroy everybody, right? But I think to get to that point, you need one of the accelerationist apocalyptic scenarios to start to play out, right? To get your peace and safety Antichrist, you need more technological progress. Like, one of the key failures of totalitarianism in the 20th century was it had a problem of knowledge. It couldn't know what was going on all over in the world, right? So you need the AI or whatever else to be capable of helping the peace and safety totalitarian rule. So don't you think you need your worst case scenario to involve some burst of progress that is then tamed and used to impose stagnant totalitarianism? You can't just get there from where we are right now.
Exactly. The guy's making, again, the boomer journalist, leftist, is making the point, even in your scenario with the Antichrist having global control, we would need immense technological advance in the areas that you support and fund for that to be the case. And of course, we're going to see that he doesn't want to answer that and doesn't really think that he's part and parcel of it. Adam Smith throws in $5. Thank you so much, Adam. He says Elon Musk will make an AI version of Donald Trump that will deceive billions. Jesus is Lord. I don't know. They're kind of on the outskirts now. I don't think Elon wants to do anything that promotes or helps advance Donald Trump right now. Chair throwing Italian throws in 5, says joined late. What's the deal with the gremlin interviewing that goal? Well, thank you very much. We got the chair throwing angry Italian on our hands. Do appreciate the support, brother. Thanks for the laugh. Jay Hamza throws in 20 and says, I guess they don't remember Nimrod or Og, Amalek. They think it's a joke. Yeah, they really do. The price they're willing to pay is gambling with our lives. Exactly. And as somebody was saying in the chat, and I think a few people are saying, I mean, this is driven. The reason why he's so obsessed about life extension, and again, had the company Parambrosia, which is about infusing older people with young people's blood, is because he has an existential fear of death. And that's what a true Christian is trying to overcome, right? That's what our goal is, to align with God so that we embrace the inevitability of our own personal finitude, our own death. And I think a lot of these transhumanists are driven by this at an unconscious level. Maybe it's conscious to them, but certainly at an unconscious level. They need to implement this on themselves. Yeah, well, some of them kind of do, but others certainly are waiting for others to take the fall of the, version 1, and then they'll adopt version 2 or 3. And then Jay followed and says, I would suggest checking out Project Bluebeam. Yeah, absolutely. There is a book about it as well. Yeah, there was a university researcher, I think it was MIT, who actually worked on some of the hologram technologies that would be used for Project Bluebeam. So that is a real thing. So if anybody calls you you're a conspiracy theorist because you brought up Project Bluebeam, no, that's a real thing. That's absolutely a real thing that we know about. So make sure, don't let anybody try to pull the wool over your eyes on that. Austin DeTulio throws in $10. Thank you so much, brother. Really appreciate that. And Harry Ludwig throws in 5, says, great podcast. Thank you very much, Harry. And then he threw in another 5, says, check out Jamie's Out of This World, episode 65, SIM on social media and AI. All right, I'll check that out. I didn't catch that episode. So thank you so much, Harry, for that support. Gorilla Biscuits throws in 10 over on Streamlabs, says, have a good stream. God bless. Well, thank you so much, Gorilla Biscuits. God bless you. And Arth Mail throws in 5, says, Thiel is homosexual. That is true. A Jew. Is he Jewish? I didn't know he was Jewish. Peter Thiel's Jewish? Fits Antichrist description of the fathers. The Antichrist will have clause per a prophecy. I feel it may be able to be interpreted as works that are technological or artificial, i.e. AI, technocracy, Palantir will be ether. Potential. I mean, me personally, I don't think the Antichrist is anybody who's already famous. Me personally. I think whoever the Antichrist will be will have a backstory and reputation that will be the most palatable for a global audience. So I personally do not believe somebody like a Peter Thiel, a Donald Trump, and Elon Musk are viable potential Antichrist. Certainly they could be led or developing aspects inspired by the spirit of Antichrist. I would definitely agree with that. So anyways, Arthmael, thank you so much for the $5. You're right on some of the general characteristics, but me personally, I just don't think it's a public figure yet. Yeah, I don't. Emmy says Thiel isn't Jewish. I didn't think he was. I know he's German. I don't know. So yeah, other people are saying, yeah, I think he's of German ancestry, both mom and dad. I don't think he is, or Ashkenaz or anything like that. So I'm not sure. You guys I can stand corrected on that. I'm not positive. But anyways, here we go. Now he's going to respond to the accusation. Don't you think for your own dystopian scenario of the Antichrist and Armageddon that technology would have to advance for that to be possible? And here's his response.
Well, it can
like Greta Thunberg's on a boat in the Mediterranean, like, like protesting Israel. Like I just don't see the promise of safety from AI, safety from tech, even safety from climate change right now as a powerful universal rallying cry, absent accelerating change and real fear of total catastrophe.
I mean, these things are so hard to score, but I think environmentalism is pretty powerful. I don't know if it's absolutely powerful enough to create a one world totalitarian state, but man, it is.
I think it is not.
It is
in its current form.
It is. I want to say it's the only thing people still believe in Europe. Like, they believe in the green thing more than Islamic Sharia law, or more than in, the Chinese communist totalitarian takeover. And the future is an idea of a future that looks different from the present. The only three on offer in Europe are green, Sharia, and, the totalitarian communist state. And the green one is by far the strongest. In
a decaying.
And I would push back on that a little bit. I would say the nationalist narrative, or the nationalist sovereign narrative that nations are sovereign, able to make their own decisions. I think that's actually the more powerful narrative than global climate change, even in Europe. But he is true in the fact that the Europeans are much more driven by that issue than maybe the American populace per se. So, but I think there's other narratives that can equally rival the climate change narrative. In fact, I think the climate change narrative has actually dissipated. Like, I'm thinking when I was in my undergrad during the Obama administration, like, I almost feel like that was the peak of the climate warming narrative. Of course, it's now rebranded as climate change. But I'm curious what you guys think. I mean, don't you feel like the climate change narrative is actually kind of waning in its ultimate political power? And that people are more interested in like political sovereignty. And I feel like this has even been true in America regarding people are so much more in favor of like drilling for oil and fracking and things like this that were kind of polarizing issues environmentally before. I don't know. Oh, Jay Hamza just gifted 5 more COTEL Crew memberships. Thank you so much, Jay. God bless you, brother. Really, really appreciate your support. And Haley's in the chat, throws in 5. Thank you so much, Haley. God bless you guys. And God bless you, Jay. Really appreciate your support, brother. Thank you very much.
Europe, it's not a dominant player in the world.
It's always in a context.
Right.
And then I would, I don't know, we we had this really complicated history with the way nuclear technology worked. And, we didn't really get to, a totalitarian one world state. But, by the 1970s, one account of the stagnation is that the runaway progress of technology had gotten very scary, and that, Baconian science, it ended at Los Alamos, and then it was okay. It ended there, and we didn't want to have any more. And when Charles Manson took LSD in the late 60s and started murdering people, what he saw on LSD, what he learned was that you could be like Dostoevsky, an anti-hero in Dostoevsky, and everything was permitted. And of course, not everyone became Charles Manson, but in
Charles Manson,
my telling of the history, everyone became as deranged as Charles Manson.
But Charles Manson did not become the Antichrist and take over the world, right? We're ending in the apocalyptic.
No, but my telling of the history of the 1970s is the hippies did win, and we landed on the moon in July of 1969. Woodstock started 3 weeks later, and with the benefit of hindsight, that's when progress stopped and the hippies won. And it was not literally Charles Manson.
Okay, but I want to stay with the Antichrist just to end, right? And you're retreating. You're saying, okay, environmentalism is already pro-stagnation and so on. Okay, let's agree with all that. But we're not living under. We're not living under the Antichrist right now. We're just stagnant, right? And you're positing that something worse could be on the horizon that would make stagnation permanent, that would be driven by fear. And I'm suggesting that for that to happen, there would have to be some burst of technological progress that was akin to Los Alamos that people are afraid of. And I guess this is my very specific question for you, right? Is that you're an investor in AI. You're deeply invested in Palantir, in military technology, in technologies of surveillance, in technologies of warfare, and so on, right? And it just seems to me that when you tell me a story about the Antichrist coming to power and using the fear of technological change to sort of impose order on the world, I feel like that Antichrist would maybe be using the tools that you were building, right? Like, wouldn't the Antichrist be like, great, we're not going to have any more technological progress, but I really like what Palantir has done so far, right?
Yeah,
isn't that a concern? Wouldn't that be the irony of history? Would be that the man publicly worrying about the Antichrist accidentally hastens his or her arrival?
Exactly.
There are all these different scenarios. I obviously don't think that that's what I'm doing. To be clear, I don't think that's what you're doing either. I'm just interested in how you get to.
Well, I do think that's what they're doing.
A world willing to submit to permanent authoritarian rule.
Well, but again, there are these different gradations of this we can describe, but is this so preposterous, what I've just told you, as a broad account of the stagnation that the entire world has submitted for 50 years to peace and safetyism? This is 1 Thessalonians 5:3. The slogan of the Antichrist is peace and safety, and we've submitted to the FDA regulates not just drugs in the U.S., but de facto in the whole world, because
peace and safety, like Palantir's promise for predictive surveillance, so that they can predict that crimes will occur before they do, so that they can protect us and save us? You mean like maybe technologies like that are literally built in the name of peace and safety? Like, again, the cognitive dissonance here and the internal blindness to see. He quotes Thessalonians and talks about that the Antichrist will promote peace and safety, and that's literally what his companies are doing. Wait, what? Like, you think the FDA is the Antichrist? Oh, come on, bro.
The rest of the world defers to the FDA. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission effectively regulates nuclear power plants all over the world. People, you can't, you can't design a modular nuclear reactor and just build it in Argentina. They won't trust the Argentinian regulators. They're going to defer to the U.S. And so it's at least a question about why we've had 50 years of stagnation. And one answer is we ran out of ideas. The other answer is that something happened culturally where it wasn't allowed. And then the cultural answer can be sort of a bottom-up answer, that it was just some transformation of humanity into this sort of more docile kind of a species, or it can be at least partially top-down, that there is this, this machinery of government that got changed into this stagnation thing. I think something like this. Nuclear power was supposed to be the power of the 21st century, and it somehow has gotten off-ramped all over the world on a worldwide basis.
Wow, could that potentially be to corporate interest and money, or is that just due to the FDA and bureaucratic institutions that are supposed to monitor these programs? I mean, obviously it's both, because the corporations control these institutions, these government institutions that he's talked about that the public has lost trust in, and therefore then regulate so that the corporations can make sure that they get their kickbacks and are making money. I mean, a la Big Pharma. I mean, this goes back to Edison and Tesla regarding AC versus DC. Like what?
No.
So in a sense, we're already living under a moderate rule of the Antichrist in that telling. Do you think God is in control of history?
Man, this is again like I think that there's always room for human freedom and human choice. These things are, or at least where we are today, these things are, they're not, they're not absolutely predetermined one way or another.
Right.
But
God wouldn't leave us forever under the rule of a mild, moderate, stagnationist Antichrist, right? That can't be how the story ends, right?
It's attributing too much causation to God is always a problem. If I know, there are different Bible verses I can give you, but I'll give you John 15:25, where Christ says, "They hated me without cause." And so it's all these people that are persecuting Christ have no reason, no cause for why they're persecuting Christ. And if we interpret this as a ultimate causation verse, they want to say, I'm persecuting because God caused me to do this. God is causing everything. And the Christian view is anti-Calvinist. God is not behind history. God is not causing everything. If you say God's causing everything,
but wait.
And this is where it's again, this is a much more delicate conversation about free will and causality in relationship to creation. God is the cause of all things. God's will allows all events to occur. At the same time, God's will is for us to have free will, in which we can be our own unmoved mover and have a causal effect in creation as well. So it's both and definitely we're not Calvinists. We don't believe in predeterminism. But yeah, God is behind history. Miracles do happen. God saves certain groups in battles, and weird occurrences occur. So God's not divorced from history, but also God's imminent presence in history doesn't nullify our free will in history either.
You're scapegoating God.
But God is behind.
God.
But God is behind Jesus Christ entering history, because God was not going to leave us in a stagnationist, decadent Roman Empire, right? So at some point, God is going to step in.
I am not
Right?
I am not that Calvinist, and
that's not Calvinism, though. That's just Christianity.
I know
it is. It is just Christianity. God became man so that man can become God by grace. That is history. That is Christianity. That does not make one a Calvinist.
God will not leave us eternally, staring into screens and being lectured by Greta Thunberg, right? He will
Correct.
not abandon us
Correct.
to that fate.
Unless, again, God never abandons us, because the second coming essentially saves us from wherever this is going. But certainly us making the free will choice to stare into our black mirrors is going to move us closer to the point in which the Antichrist arrives. So again, it's both and. God will allow us to make the choices, but again, as people repent too, that date is pushed further back. It's much more dynamic.
It is. There is a great, I don't know, for better and for worse, I think there's a great deal of scope for human action, for human freedom. If I thought these things were deterministic, you might as well, maybe just accept it. The lions are coming. You should just have some yoga and prayerful meditation and wait while the lions eat you up. And I don't think that's what you're supposed to do.
That's true. Yeah, you're not supposed to allow it to happen. That's where repentance, and notice, for a Christian presenting his Christian view on the Antichrist, morality, repentance, relationships with God, family, children, none of these things are mentioned by Peter Thiel. The whole thing is about GDP go up and technological advance goes forward. That's literally the only metric it looks like he's judging the world by.
I agree with that. And I think on that note, I'm just trying to be hopeful and suggesting that, in trying to resist the Antichrist, using your human freedom, you should have hope that you'll succeed, right?
We can agree on that.
Good. Peter Thiel, thank you for joining me.
And so that pretty much wraps up today's stream, guys. So, I mean, what are your guys' thoughts? I thought this was an important conversation because Thiel, I keep calling him Peel. I'm getting Peter and Thiel. Peter Thiel is presenting himself as a Christian, right? And giving voice to worries about AI and the problems of woke culture and Silicon Valley and stagnation. And he's pro-Trump and he's a mentor of Vance. And yet his Christianity, I mean, what exactly is Christian? He knows Bible verses. I mean, in the Hoover Institute interview, he quoted multiple Bible verses. He, for the last 6 months, he's been on this kick about Antichrist, and yet rejects any association that his technologies like Palantir and his investments could actually facilitate the thing that he's telling us to worry about. And in fact, telling us that the biggest thing we should worry about are people like Greta Thunberg. What? Yeah. That Swedish autist is not the highest on my list of existential threats to me and my family and my prosperity and my potential to facilitate growth in my parish and my religious community. Greta Thunberg is annoying, but that's who I should be worried about, and not people like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and Neuralink and Palantir. What? Absolutely ridiculous. Yeah. Vasiliki says the devil knows the Bible verses. Yeah. I think that super chatter summed it up nicely. Peter Thiel is a homosexual. Yeah. No, that's where I made that point in the beginning. I mean, there's already a massive contradiction there. Jay Hamza says, to be honest, these guys are nuts and I might be broke now. Well, Jay, thank you so much, bro, for the support. God bless you, man. And we had a new COTEL crew member, Silvar, has become a COTEL crew member. Thank you so much, brother, for joining us. Welcome to the community. And yeah, so what his like Elon cries about the dangers of AI, then wants to stick a chip in the brain. Exactly. And it's powered by Tesla AI, and Grok is Tesla AI rebranded within the X platform. And so the advantage that Grok and Tesla AI has is they have access to the entire X database for their LLM. So because they have all of that data, that their data set that the AI is pulling from, that's pretty valuable. And that's one of the things that sets their AI apart from the other ones. DPH raid Jay Dyer before you wrap up. All right. Yeah. So anyways, I'm sure this is going to come up more in future conversations because Thiel, I did it again. Thiel keeps presenting this Antichrist narrative about how essentially us to embrace his technologies, right? I mean, it's just this dumb sort of boomer dialectic that what we really need to worry about is stagnation, the wild, radical, woke left, and these progressives like Greta Thunberg who are enamored by the global climate change narrative. I don't know. I don't think that's going to be the highest on my list. Peter Thiel. That's probably what I'll start saying. Thanks, Charlie. Yeah, Greta is Islamofascism. I mean, I'm pro-Palestine in regards to Israel, so I don't know if that makes me a Islamo-fascist. I'm not pro-Islam or Judaism. Gandalf warned about using the Palantir. I think we should listen to the wizard. Exactly. And again, if you guys didn't see he's branding his new digital bank, another Tolkien themed, the Erebor. And so you just scroll through the comments. Everybody's upset that he keeps using the Lord of the Rings for his tech companies, but he's doing the same thing again. And it's like disappointing. But anyways, guys, I'm going to send you all over to Jay Dyer. I got tons of streams coming out this next week and the week after to try to catch up on all the work and content that I need to create. So I just want to thank everybody for the support today. Haley in the chat threw in another $5 over on Streamlabs. Thank you so much, Haley in the chat. God bless you, sister. Throws in $5 on Streamlabs and says, his creations are 100% projections of his fears. He is attempting to set up a self-fulfilling prophecy, whether malicious or ignorant, or a combination, is bad. No good. Time out for Peter. Yeah, I totally agree. That's exactly my opinion. And Jewish Skeptic throws in 7 over on Dono Chat and says, showing some love after that W got on whatever. God bless TPH and may Christ preserve you and your wife. Well, thank you very much, Jewish Skeptic. Really appreciate that. And guys, let me change the settings, send you guys over to Dyer's channel. I assume, what's he have, an open panel today? He was in the chat earlier. He's refuting Trent Horn. Austin DeTulio throws in 10 more bucks. Thank you so much, Austin. God bless you, brother. I really appreciate your guys' support. We only got half the goal today. I'm going to have to start coming up with something unique to offer you guys to reach a goal. I see all my friends are able to reach their goals so much easier. The financial goals you can set on YouTube. So I'm gonna have to come up with something really clever that you guys are gonna want. So maybe we can finally reach some goals. But anyways, I want to thank you all so much for the support today. Thank you all for being here. Smash that like. I hope it was insightful and just kind of keeping you up to speed on Peter Thiel and kind of this conversation around Christianity, MAGA support, and AI, transhumanists, technological development and stuff like that. So I will catch you all in the next one. As always, until then, God bless.